My son-in-law used my wife's funeral to announce my retirement before I had even thrown dirt onto her grave. He stood at the microphone in a black suit, one hand resting on the lectern like he owned grief itself, and thanked everyone for supporting our family's decision to let Victor step back while he deals with the cognitive episodes Marianne had grown so worried about. The word episodes hit the chapel before I fully understood what he had done. People turned and looked at me, not with pity, not even with concern, with that careful social look people use when they suddenly think they may have been missing a problem in plain sight. I was standing in the front row with my wife's service folder still in my hand. Her name was printed in gold on the cover, Marianne Hale, beloved wife, mother, founder, friend. The woman I had built 36 years of marriage and 32 years of business beside. And my son-in-law had just used her funeral to introduce me as a man who could no longer be trusted with his own life. I remember the exact sound of the chapel air conditioning kicking on behind me. I remember the florist's tape under one pew coming loose and sticking to the floor. I remember the smell of lilies and furniture polish. I remember all of it because that was the moment my grief changed shape. Before that sentence, I thought I was burying my wife. After that sentence, I understood I was attending the opening move of a coup. My name is Victor Hale. I am 67 years old. I founded Hale Hospitality Group with Marianne when all we had was one drafty roadside inn outside Charlottesville, a second-hand desk, and the kind of confidence you only have before life teaches you what things cost. By the time Marianne died, our company ran 7 historic inns, 3 event properties, a vineyard that nearly ruined us before it made us respectable, and enough payroll to make every bad quarter feel personal. People call that success when they are standing far enough away from it. Up close, it looks like mortgages, lawsuits, payroll weeks, busted boilers, bad weather, linen shortages, nervous lenders, and at least one cousin every decade asking if there is a quiet place for him in management. Marianne understood that before I did. She understood almost everything before I did. She could walk into a room, listen for 90 seconds, and tell you who was lying, who was frightened, and which one of those 2 conditions would cause more damage by supper. She had soft hands and a merciless eye. She loved old brick buildings, sharp pencils, garden shears, bourbon in tiny amounts, and plain answers. She hated waste, vague language, and men who thought a lower voice automatically made them wiser. When we met, she was 26 and managing front desk shifts at a hotel nobody with any real choices would have booked twice. I was 29 and thought owning a failing inn with 12 rooms and an unreliable water heater made me some kind of frontier capitalist. She corrected that delusion in under a week. "You don't own a business, Victor," she told me on our 3rd date. "At best, you get to keep proving to it that it should not kill you." I married her 6 months later because life occasionally rewards speed. We had 2 children, Eliza first, then Noah 3 years later. Eliza got Marianne's posture, Marianne's calm face, and my tendency to assume confidence means competence. Noah got my dark hair, Marianne's suspicion, and the family talent for saying the wrong true thing at the worst possible time. For years, we were what people like to call solid, not perfect. Solid. The kind of family whose cracks only show if you live inside the walls. Eliza married Nathan Cole at 29. That is where I should tell you I distrusted him from the start. It would make me sound sharper than I was. The truth is worse. I liked him. Not instantly. I am not that easy. But steadily. Nathan had the exact kind of polish Marianne distrusted, and I tolerated. Good schools, careful smile, excellent suits that looked expensive without announcing it, a way of speaking that made bankers nod and slower men feel briefly grateful he had summarized the room for them. He came into the company first as a consultant during a refinancing year, then stayed as head of strategic planning, then made himself so useful with lenders and expansion models that when Eliza fell in love with him, I mistook my own professional dependence for personal trust. Marianne did not. She never accused him directly. That was not her style. She just made observations that bothered me because they were too precise to wave away comfortably. "He never answers the question he was asked," she told me once after a board dinner. "He answers the question that lets him look best after hearing it." Another time she said, "Nathan behaves like every room is a hearing, and he is already editing the transcript." I laughed then, said she was being hard on him because he was ambitious. She shook her head and said the line I have thought about 1,000 times since. "Ambition is not the problem, Victor. The problem is hunger without reverence." That was Marianne. She could summarize a whole man in 6 words and leave you irritated because you knew she might be right. Nathan and Eliza had 1 daughter together, Sophie. She was 12 when Marianne died, and 14 when I finally understood how many people in my family had been standing in the wrong light on purpose. Noah never trusted Nathan. That is important, and, for a long time, deeply inconvenient. Noah worked in operations after college. He knew the properties. He knew the actual work. Boilers, vendors, banquet margins, staff turnover, delivery windows, license renewals, roof leaks, guest complaints that sound absurd until they cost you $10,000. He knew the company from the underside, where truth usually lives. Nathan knew the company from spreadsheets and conference calls and strategic decks with blue arrows going up. There is room for both kinds of men in business. There is usually not peace between them. By the time Nathan became chief financial officer, Noah had already had 3 major fights with him. One over a supplier deal Nathan loved because the numbers looked elegant, and Noah hated because the vendor's trucks never arrived on time. One over staffing cuts at the mountain property. One over a proposed sale-leaseback structure Nathan called modern, and Noah called a panic move in loafers. Their last fight happened in my office 2 years before Marianne got sick. Nathan had presented an expansion plan for acquiring 2 conference resorts in Tennessee. Lenders were warm. The debt package was complicated. The upside, according to Nathan, was transformative. The downside, according to Noah, was that we would be borrowing against good properties to chase size we had not earned. "You don't understand scale," Nathan said to him that day, calm as cream. "And you don't understand weather," Noah said back. Or kitchens, or linen, or weddings, or pipes, or mildew, or human beings once they leave PowerPoint. I should have listened harder then. Instead, I did what fathers who run companies too long often do. I split the difference and called it leadership. I told Noah to watch his tone. I told Nathan to simplify the proposal. I told myself both men would mature. Noah left the company 4 months later. Officially, he said he wanted his own life and a break from family politics. Unofficially, he told Marianne that Nathan was not building a better version of Hale Hospitality. He was positioning it for something that smelled like exit money. Marianne told me that in our kitchen, while chopping parsley, the knife never stopped moving. "What did you say?" I asked. "That he might be right," she said. "And what do you think?" She looked down at the cutting board for a long time before answering. "I think Nathan always talks like the future belongs to him. Men who truly love a company rarely speak that way. Men who plan to rearrange one do. I did not act on that either. So when I say what happened later was not because nobody warned me, understand that I know. I know exactly how many warnings I translated into overprotective instincts, generational noise, or anxiety from people who did not love seeing change. That is part of the punishment, not just being betrayed. Understanding how often betrayal had to knock before you finally answered the door. Marianne got sick in October, pancreatic cancer, the kind of diagnosis that changes the air in a room before it changes the words. We were in Baltimore for what was supposed to be a second opinion on a persistent pain. By lunch, we were talking about treatment windows and margins and quality of life. By evening, I had learned there are entire vocabularies doctors use when the truth is too brutal to say all at once. Marianne lasted 11 months. 11 months of chemo, 11 months of stubbornness, 11 months of her refusing to let illness turn her into a soft focus lesson for the rest of us. She attended 2 board meetings with a port in her chest, reviewed contracts from an infusion chair, corrected a sommelier's purchase list from bed because she said if she had to die, she was not doing it while paying $12 over market for mediocre Pinot. She also started watching Nathan differently. I noticed it in small ways at first. Longer pauses after his presentations, questions that sounded ordinary until you looked at what they cornered, a request for backup documents instead of summary sheets. A second look at signature pages, silence when he tried one of his smooth bridge phrases, words like "as we all know," or "obviously," or "to simplify." Those phrases worked on most rooms. They never worked on Marianne once she decided to sharpen. One evening in May, 3 months before she died, she asked me to bring the green accounting binders to our bedroom, not the digital files. The old physical binders our controller still kept because Marianne said paper has a harder time pretending to have never existed. She sat up against the pillows in one of my college sweatshirts, with a yellow legal pad beside her and a pair of reading glasses sliding down her nose. When I brought the binders in, she tapped the bed and said, "Sit." Then she opened a folder on Vineyard Terrace renovation financing and showed me 2 pages. Side by side, same transaction, different language on the fee notes. One sheet listed advisory structuring support, the other listed transition fee placeholder, same amount, different description. I frowned and said maybe one was draft language, maybe, she said, and maybe Nathan is paying himself for an exit he has not told us about. That got my attention. Finally, not enough, but more than before. We spent 3 hours that night going through financing schedules, lender notes, deferred vendor arrangements, and one consulting agreement attached to an acquisition vehicle I had not even known had been drafted. By midnight, Marianne had a whole pad covered in arrows, dates, initials, and question marks. "Is it theft?" I asked. Not yet, she said, but it is preparation. And preparation matters. What do you want to do? She put down her pen, looked at the ceiling, then back at me. I want an independent audit after the summer season. Quietly. No drama until we know what we know. And I want Nathan nowhere near the selection of the firm. All right, I said. She nodded, then added, I also want you to stop taking those sleep tablets from Byron Keene. Byron Keene was Nathan's neurologist friend, or that is how he entered our lives. At first he was useful. Then he became present. Then somehow he became one of those people who can walk into family crises because he arrived carrying a medical degree and everybody else was too tired to argue. When Marianne's pain began making sleep impossible, Nathan introduced Keene as a specialist in stress, sleep, and cognitive overload. That should have sounded ridiculous even then. But when your wife is dying, you become less elegant than you imagine. You take help from the hands nearest you. Keene gave Marianne nothing substantial. She distrusted him on sight, said his eyes smiled slower than his mouth. But he gave me a prescription for low-dose sleep support after 3 weeks of me looking like a man who had been laminated and then left in the rain. It helped, at first. Then, after Marianne's final hospitalization, Nathan started bringing me the tablets himself, always with the same calm concern. You need rest, Victor. Your mind is doing too much at once. You need to protect your clarity. You can't help anyone by running yourself into collapse. All of that sounded right. It also turned out to be useful to him in ways I did not understand until far too late. Marianne died on a Thursday at 4:17 in the morning. I was there. Eliza was there. Nathan was there. Noah arrived 7 minutes too late and carried that 7 minutes like a brick in his chest for the next year. Marianne had not spoken much that last night. Cancer strips language down to what matters. Around 1 in the morning, she squeezed my hand and whispered, "Don't let grief make you delegable." I leaned closer because I thought I had heard her wrong. What? She opened her eyes just enough to fix them on me. Don't let them turn your grief into paperwork. Then she closed her eyes again. Those were among the last clear words she gave me. At the time, I took them as one of Marianne's odd, beautiful warnings. The kind of line a clever dying woman says because she still cannot resist telling the truth sharply. I did not yet understand she was naming the exact shape of the attack coming from me. The funeral was scheduled for Monday. Marianne had hated dragging sorrow out longer than necessary. Use the chapel at Ashcroft. She had told Eliza months earlier when funeral plans moved from abstract horror to practical talk. No ugly banquet chairs, no slideshow with piano covers of songs people don't understand, and no one gets to tell lies because I'm dead and polite people feel trapped. That last instruction did not survive her. Ashcroft Chapel sits on our oldest property. Stone walls, dark beams, lead glass windows that make morning light look like judgment. Marianne loved that place because it was beautiful without being sentimental. We married there in 1990 before we owned it. Bought the property 9 years later when its banknote went toxic and the previous family finally admitted charm does not pay plumbers. By Monday morning, the chapel was full. Board members, lenders, vendors, employees from every property, people who loved Marianne, people who admired Marianne. People who feared Marianne a little and respected her more because of it. I stood in the front pew numb enough to make bad decisions look like patience. Nathan moved through that morning like a man who had practiced grief in mirrors. Never too much, never too little. Always exactly where cameras or older women or board members might notice him being useful. He coordinated cars, checked seating, thanked staff, touched elbows, lowered his voice, adjusted one of Sophie's gloves as though fatherhood had softened him into sainthood. I noticed none of that in the suspicious way then. I noticed it the way a tired man notices competence and feels relieved not to be carrying the whole room alone. The service itself was beautiful. That is part of why what happened next felt so obscene. Reverend Paulson did not overspeak. Noah read from Ecclesiastes with a steady voice that somehow hurt me worse than tears would have. Eliza sang 2 verses of an old hymn Marianne liked because its lyrics refused to flatter death. I gave the eulogy. At least I was supposed to give the only family eulogy. I spoke for maybe 12 minutes. I talked about the first in, about Marianne training every young manager to read contracts all the way to the footer, about the way she could cut a supplier bill by 7% while pruning roses with the other hand, about her laugh when she was truly amused, and the look she gave men who used unnecessary jargon. I talked about the vineyard in the early years when every frost felt personal. I talked about the 2 children she raised while pretending exhaustion was just another weather pattern you learned to dress for. I talked about love in the only way I knew how then, which was mostly by talking about work, because work was where we had spent our lives side by side. When I finished, the room stood. Not because I deserved it, because Marianne did. I sat down thinking the worst part of the day, the public part, was over. Then Nathan rose. He was not on the printed program. I know that now because I still have the original folded copy in my desk drawer, the one before the ushers swapped them for the revised version inserted at the last minute. At the time, I did not notice. Grieving men notice voices. They do not notice typography unless they already know someone is editing the room. Nathan reached the lectern with one hand over his heart and a face composed into the exact degree of strain that invites sympathy without threatening composure. He began by thanking everyone for the grace they had shown our family. Then he thanked the staff at Ashcroft, then the hospice team, then the chapel florist, then our board for, as he put it, helping steady the company through a season Marianne never wanted to burden anyone with publicly. That sentence made June Mercer look up in the third row. June had been our corporate secretary for 18 years. She knew minutes, resolutions, and procedural language the way priests know liturgy. When people borrow board vocabulary in emotional settings, June notices. It is one of the reasons Nathan never liked her. I noticed her noticing him. Then he kept going. Marianne cared deeply about continuity, Nathan said, about stewardship, about making sure what she and Victor built would be safe even when life forced hard transitions on the family. Still nothing overt, still plausible, still draped in enough grief to keep decent people from interrupting. Then he said it. In the last weeks, as many of you know, Marianne had grown increasingly concerned about Victor's episodes of confusion and exhaustion, especially around numbers and signatures, and one of the final family decisions we made together was to begin the process of letting him step back with dignity while the board and our advisory team protect the business during this difficult season. The room changed, not loudly, not theatrically. It just changed. Heads turned, eyes shifted. One lender in the back row lowered his service card. Somebody near the side aisle whispered what? I heard Sophie inhale beside Eliza. I heard Noah make a sound in the front pew that was too angry to be a breath and too contained to be speech. And I, idiot that I was, did not stand up immediately, because my first reaction was not fury. It was confusion so complete it felt like my own mind had slipped on a stair. What episodes? What board process? What advisory team? When had Marianne and I made any such family decision? Nathan looked right at me while he said the next line. Victor would never have wanted today to become administrative, so we will handle details privately in the coming days. But I know Marianne would want all of you, especially our employees and partners, to hear directly that the company is protected and the transition plan has her blessing. Transition plan. Blessing. I think if he had shouted that he was stealing my house, I might have understood faster. But lies wrapped in reverent language take a second longer to land. By the time they do, the liar has usually crossed the room. The service ended in a blur after that. Reverend Paulson closed in prayer, people stood. The recessional began, and grief, being the perfect cover for confusion, let Nathan's speech drift into the crowd before I had found words sharp enough to stop it. At the gravesite, the sky was white and flat. The ground crew had laid green turf around the opening because Marianne despised messy funerals and apparently still had veto power from beyond reason. I stood beside the casket with a handful of dirt and thought, he just told 400 people I'm losing my mind. Then I put the dirt down because my wife was in the ground, and for 1 sick, suspended minute, I could not decide which violation I was supposed to answer first. Noah decided for me. He came across the grass before the last car had even pulled away from the chapel. What the hell was that? He said. His voice was low because we were still near guests. Low and shaking and furious in the exact way boys become men when they realize nobody older is moving fast enough. Eliza flinched. Nathan stepped between us without looking like he was stepping between us. Not here, he said gently. Noah laughed once. A short, brutal sound. Exactly here, he said. At Mom's grave is exactly where a man should answer for using the word confusion in front of a lender. Eliza turned to me. Dad, say something. I did, just not fast enough and not well enough. Nathan, I said, what were you talking about? He gave me a look I still hate remembering. Concern arranged into patience. The look of a son-in-law managing a fragile elder without embarrassing him. You know what I was talking about, Victor. We discussed this with Marianne when your sleep issues got worse. We agreed we would keep it quiet until after the service. No, we did not, I said. He did not blink. That was his gift. He almost never blinked when other men would have. You may not remember the exact conversations, he said quietly, and that's part of why Marianne wanted this handled gently. Noah took 1 step toward him, and I had to grab his sleeve because I suddenly saw the headline and the scandal and the grief turned into a family brawl over fresh dirt. Nathan saw me grab him. Of course he did. That too helped him. Eliza was crying by then. Stop it. Please just stop. Today is not the day for this. Nathan touched her elbow with the practiced tenderness of a man placing himself beside the correct emotion. No one is trying to upset anyone, he said. I'm trying to protect the company and the family the way Marianne asked me to. There it was again. Marianne as witness, Marianne as cover, Marianne dead and therefore unable to step out from the ground and call him a lying bastard to his face. I almost hit him then. I do not say that proudly, I say it because truth matters. I almost hit my son-in-law standing over my wife's grave. The only reason I did not is that June Mercer appeared at my shoulder like a procedural angel and said, "Victor, Arthur Bell is looking for you by the cars." Arthur Bell had been our outside counsel for 29 years. White hair, knife-edge memory, an immune system made almost entirely of contempt for careless paperwork. If Arthur wanted me, something structural had already started to move. I left Noah swearing under his breath, Eliza crying into Nathan's shoulder, and the grave crew pretending not to hear any of us. Arthur stood beside the black town car with one hand in his coat pocket and a cream folder under the other arm. "What happened in there?" he asked. "I think my son-in-law just announced my removal from my own company." Arthur nodded once. Not surprise, recognition. I was afraid of something like that. Something like what? He handed me the cream folder. Inside were copies of 2 documents I had never seen. The first was labeled Emergency Continuity Resolution. The second was labeled Temporary Delegation of Chairman Authority Pending Cognitive Evaluation. My mouth actually went dry, not metaphorically. My body physically forgot moisture. "Who gave you these?" "June," Arthur said. "They were being circulated in the receiving room before the service. Board packet copies. Confidential. Prepared for signature tomorrow." I looked at the signature line on the second document. My name was already there. Or rather, a version of my name was there. A scanned copy lifted from somewhere else and dropped into place with enough skill to fool a casual glance and not enough to survive Marianne's eye or Arthur's. I looked up slowly. "That is not my signature." "I know," Arthur said. "Did Marianne know about any of this?" "No. And if she had, there would be a crater where your son-in-law is standing." That helped. A little. Sometimes anger needs one sane witness before it can stand up properly. I turned pages with shaking hands. The continuity resolution cited concern over recent disorientation, inconsistent signature behavior, missed financial details, and increasing dependence on others for administrative review. The delegation document empowered Nathan Cole as interim executive authority over lender communications, major operating decisions, and strategic transaction review, pending final medical guidance from one Dr. Byron Keene. Byron Keene. There he was, not in the chapel, not at the grave, in the footer, exactly where Marianne always said the truth gets nervous and starts hiding. Arthur spoke very quietly. "June said Nathan brought revised funeral programs this morning and a sealed packet for board members only. Said it was just continuity language in case anyone asked about your availability after the burial. She opened it because Nathan forgot she can smell a resolution through paper." I kept staring at my own forged name. "Victor," Arthur said, "did you authorize any medical evaluation tied to your competence?" "No." "Any board action to reduce your role?" "No." "Any delegation to Nathan?" "No." He nodded once. Then his face hardened in that lawyer way that means the room has shifted from concern to war. "Good. Then listen to me carefully. Do not sign anything. Do not take any medication Nathan gives you. Do not agree to any private family meeting without me or June present. And do not let grief make you embarrassed enough to stay polite." Marianne had said something close to that. Not the words, the principle. I looked toward the chapel parking lot where Nathan was helping Eliza into the car as though he were guiding a woman through tragedy instead of positioning her inside a fraud. "What else?" I asked. Arthur pulled one more page from the folder. A memo from Nathan to selected board members marked confidential. I read only the first line before the blood seemed to leave my fingers. "Given Victor's recent episodes and Marianne's expressed fears before her passing, I believe it is our duty to move with compassion but speed." Episodes. Expressed fears. Duty. Compassion. Speed. That is how white-collar theft speaks when it wants to sound like care. I folded the page once, then again, very neatly. Because if I had not done something precise with my hands, I might have lost the use of them for a minute. "Arthur," I said, "how many people saw that speech for what it was?" He considered the question, then answered honestly, which is why I kept him for 3 decades. Not enough. Yet. By the time we reached Ashcroft House for the receiving line, Nathan's version of events had already started doing what versions like his do. It had not fully become truth. That takes longer, but it had become plausible enough to poison neutrality. 2 board members offered me condolences with an extra beat of carefulness in their voices. One lender shook my hand with both of his and said, "We're all here to support whatever is best for your family, Victor." A vendor from Richmond looked at Nathan before asking me whether I needed anything. Support, family, best, need. All those soft words suddenly had elbows. Inside the receiving room, Framed photos of Marianne stood on side tables beside arrangements of white roses and dark blue hydrangeas. Somebody had put her gardening hat on one of the chairs because they thought it was sweet. It made me want to break glass. Grief will do that. It turns adorable gestures into assaults without warning. June Mercer intercepted me before I could reach the line. "Come with me," she said. No preamble, no softness, just that. June is 59, wears her gray hair in a hard French twist, and has the organizational instincts of a military archivist raised by disappointed Catholics. She led me through the library doors, shut them, and set another packet on the desk. "I found 4 versions," she said. "The first 2 mention rest. The third mentions episodes. The fourth mentions potential incapacity filing if cooperation is delayed." I stared at her. "Incapacity filing." She nodded. "Probate court if needed. Temporary oversight petition. Whoever drafted this wanted options." "Byron," I said. Arthur, who had followed us in, said, "Byron alone could not move something like this. He'd need family statements or board support or both." I thought of Eliza in the graveyard, already half convinced by Nathan's tone, if not yet by the facts. I thought of Noah, outside the company and therefore easier to characterize as emotional. I thought of Sophie hearing adults use words like confusion and transition in the same breath as my name. "What else?" I asked. June passed me a program from the chapel, the revised one. Nathan's name had been inserted beneath mine under family remarks and reflections. No one had asked me. No one had told me. The print alignment was off by half a hair, exactly the kind of detail June notices and other people only feel. "He had the chapel AV staff load a slide too," she said. "We stopped it when Arthur asked to review the sequence. It was titled Stewardship in Transition." My eyes came up. What was on it? A photo of you and Marianne at the vineyard. Then the company logo. Then the words continuing her legacy with care. That was when it fully clicked. He had not improvised at the microphone. He had staged an emotional rollout. He had built a whole visual frame around the idea that I was stepping aside because my dead wife had wanted it. If Arthur had not interrupted the AV cue, there might have been applause. That is how close performance sometimes gets to becoming fact. I sat down in Marianne's library chair. The leather creaked under me. She used to sit there late with a yellow pencil, margin notes, and one foot tucked beneath her. I had never noticed until that second how much of a room's authority can vanish when the woman who made it truthful is gone. "Victor," June said, "did Marianne ever mention concerns about Nathan to you directly?" "Yes." "How directly?" "Enough. Not enough for a courtroom," Arthur said. "Maybe enough for motive, but motive is not proof. What we need now is structure. Who prepared the medical language? Who circulated the board packets? Who instructed the AV team? Who touched your signature? And whether this was only about control or about some transaction needed to see, Nathan needed done while the family was disoriented. That last line cut through the haze better than anything else. Some transaction Nathan needed done. Because yes, he wanted control. That was obvious now. But control is usually the instrument, not the song. The song is almost always money. I thought of the Tennessee Conference Resort proposal, the off-book advisory language Marianne flagged, the way Nathan always talked about value unlock instead of stewardship, the way Noah said exit money with the disgust of a man describing mold. "What is he trying to do?" I asked. Arthur answered first. "Maybe nothing beyond positioning. Maybe everything beyond positioning." "Men do not forge signatures for rest periods, Victor," June added, "and men do not use funerals for soft launches unless timing matters." Timing mattered. Of course it did. Grief makes questions look cruel and delay look compassionate. Everybody around me was exhausted. Everybody respectable wanted quiet. If Nathan could get a board action through within 48 hours, anything I said afterward could be framed as a destabilized patriarch refusing help. The funeral was not disrespectful excess. It was tactical cover. And the worst part was that for a few poisonous minutes, it had worked. The receiving line became theater after that. I went back out because disappearing would have helped him. Nathan was standing near the front doors, receiving condolences beside Eliza and Sophie. He looked exactly how a grieving executive son-in-law should look if he had ordered himself from a catalog. When I approached, Sophie reached for me first. That nearly undid me. "Granddad," she whispered, "are you okay?" I kissed her forehead and said yes, because adults lie most often to children when the room is too full to tell them anything useful. Then I looked at Nathan and said, "We need to talk." He gave me a sad, patient glance. "Of course. Not now. Now," I said. Eliza touched my sleeve. "Dad, please." "No," I said. "Not please. No performances." "What did you mean by cognitive episodes?" Her face changed. Not guilt. Alarm. Nathan stepped in cleanly. "Victor, you're escalating. This isn't fair to Eliza." "Fair. That word in a funeral house should be illegal." "You used my wife's service to circulate documents with my forged signature," I said. "Nothing about today has anything to do with fairness." His eyes flashed then. Only once. Cold and immediate. Then the mask returned. "Arthur must have shown you an early draft," he said. It wasn't ready. That is unfortunate. But no one is forging anything. These were continuity protections. Marianne asked me to help prepare in case your condition worsened. There. Condition. Another rung down from episodes. Another medical word placed where plain speech should have been. What condition? Sleep destabilization, he said, still soft. Disorientation. The missed lender call. The wrong signature packet last month. Byron has been worried for weeks. I stared at him. The missed lender call had happened the morning after one of the tablets he brought me when I had slept only 90 minutes in 2 days. The wrong signature packet had been a vendor renewal he himself took back from me, saying I was overtired and he would have June recollate it. Events. Little events. Normal events in a season of death and exhaustion. Each one suddenly displayed as evidence inside a case I had not known was being built. Eliza looked between us. Dad, Mom did mention being worried about how tired you were. Tired is not incapacitated, I said. No one said incapacitated, Nathan replied instantly. June Mercer, standing 5 feet away, laughed aloud. Actually, the fourth draft does, she said. There are certain kinds of silence only competent women can create in public. June created one then. Half the room did not know what she meant. The half that did suddenly wanted to know more. Nathan's jaw tightened. June, I think you've misunderstood a preliminary memo. No, she said. I think you misunderstood the difference between planning and consent. Arthur stepped closer. Nathan, all proposed continuity actions are frozen pending review. Nothing moves tonight. Nothing moves tomorrow morning. And if I hear the phrase cognitive episode attached to my client one more time without a licensed independent evaluation, you are prepared to defend under oath. I will make your week remarkably educational. The receiving room had gone so quiet by then that you could hear someone in the hallway refill a water pitcher. Eliza's face had gone white. She looked at Nathan, then at me, then at Arthur, then back at Nathan like a woman watching two realities collide and not yet knowing which one had the legal claim on her marriage. Sophie, I said quietly, why don't you go sit with Aunt Valerie for a few minutes? She hesitated. Children always know when adults are suddenly using calm as a shield. Then she nodded and slipped away. Eliza swallowed hard. Dad, can we do this privately? Yes, I said. Now, we used Marianne's old planning room at the back of the house. The room where she used to review banquet layouts and guest flow for spring weddings. The room had a long oak table, 6 ladder-back chairs, 1 wall of corkboards, and 3 years of old event tags still pinned in the corner because no one had had the nerve to touch anything she touched last. Present were me, Eliza, Nathan, Arthur, and June. Noah refused the first invitation, then walked in anyway 2 minutes later and leaned against the wall with both arms folded because anger has a way of finding doors once family starts lying under chandeliers. Arthur put the packet in the middle of the table. Explain these, he said. Nathan did not sit immediately. He remained standing with one hand on the chair back. That was deliberate. Standing men look more composed when they want to imply other people are overreacting from lower positions. These are internal preparedness documents, he said, not final actions. Marianne asked me to coordinate contingencies because Victor's sleep and cognition were becoming unpredictable and the business cannot afford a vacuum while everyone is grieving. Did Marianne ask for my scanned signature? I said. He looked at the page, then at me, then gave the answer men like him give when direct facts corner them too soon. That version should not have circulated. That was not the question. No, he said. Not in that form. Noah barked a laugh. In that form, Jesus Christ. Eliza turned to him. Stop. No, Noah said. You stop. He's speaking in fire code. Either he forged Dad's name or he didn't. Nathan finally sat. I almost wished he had stayed standing. Seated, he looked more dangerous because calm had somewhere to rest. I am trying to keep this family from collapsing in public, he said. Victor has been impaired. Everyone here knows it, even if no one wants to say it bluntly on the day we buried Marianne. Impaired how? I asked. He exhaled slowly, misplacing packets, missing deadlines, repeating questions, signing the same vendor authorization twice, needing medication to sleep, forgetting conversations. I looked at Arthur, then June, then Noah. The first 3 happened in the last 6 weeks of my wife's cancer, and only after Nathan began bringing me those pills personally, I said. The repeated questions happened because he kept answering actual questions with summaries instead of documents. And the duplicate vendor authorization was for a contract he recollated himself after telling me I was too tired to look at it properly. Eliza looked sharply at Nathan. What pills? Sleep support, he said quickly. Low dose. Byron prescribed them. You know that. I know he prescribed something, she said. I didn't know you were bringing them. He shrugged. I was helping. Victor was barely sleeping. Your mother was dying. There's a category of sentence that becomes evil only because of timing. That was one. Everything true inside it had been used for something filthy outside it. June slid another page across the table. who instructed chapel staff to print revised programs naming you as a speaker. Nathan glanced at the page. I did. Marianne and I had discussed adding a short continuity note if needed. Noah pushed off the wall. You keep saying Mom discussed it. When? Where? Who else was in the room? Nathan turned to Eliza instead of answering Noah. Your brother is not objective. Noah took one step and Arthur raised one finger without looking at him. It was enough. That is how long Arthur had been around us. Answer the question, Arthur said. Nathan rested both hands on the table. Your mother and I discussed it twice during the last month. Once in the hospital, once at Ashcroft. She was worried about Victor's exhaustion and the strain it was placing on his judgment. I said, did you ever tell me that? You were overwhelmed. That is not an answer. It is the explanation. No, I said. It is the excuse. Eliza had started crying again, but different tears now. Not funeral tears. Frightened calculation tears. The kind a woman cries when marriage, family, money, and the memory of her mother all get forced into the same minute. Why wouldn't you tell me, Nathan? He reached for her hand. She did not take it. Good. Very good. Because your mother asked me not to burden you while she was alive, he said. June said, funny, because she told me on August 12th to bring her the raw lender schedules and to make sure Nathan didn't pre-digest them first. Nathan's head turned. What? June looked almost bored. She left me 3 voicemails that week asking for original debt files, not summary decks. She also asked whether the Tennessee acquisition vehicle still existed on paper. Would you like me to play the messages, or shall we keep pretending Marianne died too early to contradict you? That landed. Hard. Eliza looked at me. Dad, did Mom think something was wrong? I told the truth then because not telling it had already cost enough. Yes. She wanted a quiet audit after the season. She thought Nathan might be positioning fees or side arrangements she hadn't approved. Nathan's chair scraped back. That is absurd. So are funeral speeches about my episodes, I said. He stood, then smiled. It was the first truly ugly expression I had seen fully reach his eyes. All right, he said. Let's stop pretending this is about one speech. Victor, the company is over-leveraged. The vineyard expansion ran hotter than projected. The Ashcroft renovation schedule slipped. Vineyard Terrace is still carrying deferred obligations. If lenders lose confidence right now, after Marianne dies while you look and sound like this, we don't have a company to fight over. There. Finally. Almost truth. A door cracked open by arrogance. What did you do? I asked. I stabilized a situation you refused to see, he snapped. For years. Because Marianne made every hard choice feel emotional, and you made every emotional choice feel operational. And in between the two of you, this business kept pretending loyalty was a capital structure. June whispered, there it is. Nathan ignored her. We needed a transition. We needed a grown-up lender narrative before rumors started. And yes, Victor, you have looked impaired, because you have been impaired. By grief, by pills, by exhaustion, by age. Pick whichever one comforts you. Lenders do not care which adjective destroys signatures as long as the signatures stop mattering. Eliza stared at him. You were going to use Mom's funeral to start a lender narrative. His face changed immediately. He realized he had crossed out of strategy and into honesty. I was going to prevent a panic, he said. Arthur stood. Conversation over. Nathan, from this moment forward, you are not to contact lenders, board members, or staff on behalf of Hale Hospitality without written clearance. June will issue a hold notice tonight. Victor retains full authority until a court or a board says otherwise, and if either process begins under fraudulent medical pretenses, I will personally enjoy discovery. Nathan actually laughed. You think you can stop this with one lawyer and a secretary? June smiled thinly. I am not a secretary, Nathan. That is probably the oldest mistake you keep making. The meeting broke there, not because it was finished, because everybody suddenly understood there were 2 wars now. The public one had begun in the chapel. The private one had begun around that table. No amount of decency would put either back in the box. Eliza followed me into the side hall afterward. Dad, she said, wait. I stopped near the back staircase where Marianne used to leave fresh herbs in ceramic bowls because she believed houses should smell alive. The bowls were empty now. Did you really not know, she asked, about what he was going to say, about the documents, any of it? No. She covered her mouth with one hand. I don't know what I thought. He told me Mom was afraid you were slipping. He said the pills were making you stable enough to get through her treatments. He said you didn't want anyone making a fuss and that after the service we'd just quietly redistribute some responsibilities until winter. Until winter. The season matters in hospitality. By winter, contracts renew. Debt packages get renegotiated, budgets harden, narratives calcify. A temporary story in September becomes a permanent reality by Christmas if enough men in dark suits repeat it over lunch. Did Mom ever say that herself? I asked. Eliza's answer took too long. No, she said finally. He said she said it. There it was. Marriage boiled down to hearsay at the back stairs of a funeral house. I wanted to comfort her. I wanted to ask how she could have believed a man carrying revised programs into her mother's memorial. I wanted to demand whether she noticed how often he used care as a disguise for speed. Instead, I said the thing that mattered most. Eliza, go home with Sophie tonight. Do not sign anything. Do not let Nathan hand you any papers and call them housekeeping. And if he says your mother wanted something, ask him why he keeps needing a dead woman to speak for him. She cried harder after that, which told me the sentence landed where it should. Noah drove me home that night because Arthur refused to let me be alone, and June insisted she was going to spend the next 4 hours pulling every board distribution log Nathan had touched in the last 10 days. Nathan sent 3 messages before midnight. We need to reset this before Noah poisons you further. You are making this uglier than Marianne would have wanted. Please do not let Arthur escalate a family matter into a governance crisis. Family matter, governance crisis. Even his panic came with deck language. I did not reply. At 12:46 in the morning, hospice nurse Denise Romero knocked on my front door, holding a pharmacy bag and my empty sleep bottle. That was when the story got worse in a direction I had not even thought to fear. Denise Romero had cared for Marianne through the last 7 weeks. She was 43, Puerto Rican, practical, unsentimental, and blessed with the exact kind of face that makes self-important men lower their voices without fully knowing why. She had tattoos under her scrub sleeves, wore no wedding ring, and never once asked us how we were doing in that syrupy tone people use when they want grief to confirm them as kind. She asked useful questions. Are her lips dry? Did she keep the broth down? How many hours since the last dose? Who moved this chair? Why is this oxygen tubing kinked? Did anyone besides me give him medication? That last question came back to me later. Too late, but not uselessly late. When I opened the door, she held up the orange bottle. You need to tell me why this label changed, she said. I let her in and turned on the foyer light. The house looked wrong. That happens after funerals. Rooms feel staged for a play no one intends to continue. What do you mean changed? She walked straight to the kitchen, set the bottle under the pendant light, and put on a pair of cheap reading glasses from her scrub pocket. This is not the same refill I logged, she said. Same drug family, different dose, different tablet manufacturer, and the fill date has been replaced with a reprinted label. I stared at the bottle. It looked like every bottle had looked all summer. Orange plastic, white cap, tiny authority. I had never thought to inspect it like evidence. Nathan picked those up for me last week, I said. Denise looked up slowly. Of course he did. She pulled a folded sheet from the pharmacy bag, the original medication printout from our local pharmacy, lower dose, different tablet color, no refill authorized after Marianne's final hospital discharge. Victor, she said, who has been giving these to you? Nathan? Sometimes he leaves them by the coffee machine. Sometimes he hands them to me. He said Byron adjusted the strength because I wasn't sleeping through the night. Did Byron tell you that himself? No. Did the pharmacy? No. Did anyone except Nathan? No. She closed her eyes for 1 second, then opened them with the controlled fury of a woman who has seen enough bad families to know what kind of shape this might take. Do not take another one, she said. Not even if God himself hands it to you in a saucer. I don't know yet whether this is illegal, negligent, or just obscenely reckless, but it is wrong. That word mattered more than medical language. Wrong. Clear. Human. Not condition, not support, not management. Wrong. How bad, I asked. Depends on the actual milligrams and what you were already taking. Could be enough to make you groggy, forgetful, slow on timing, slow on retrieval. Could absolutely make an exhausted grieving man look worse than he is, especially if someone documented every slow answer like it meant decline. Slow answer. Wrong retrieval. Groggy. Forgetful. I thought about the missed lender call. The duplicate vendor sheet. The morning I signed the wrong page because Nathan had told me we were reordering packets while my head still felt full of wool. I thought about Marianne telling me to stop taking those tablets. I thought about Byron Keene's careful voice. I thought about Nathan bringing me water with one hand and concern with the other. Why would he do this? I asked. Denise answered the only honest way a useful adult can when she does not yet have proof. I don't know. But if someone needed a pattern of fog around you, this would help create one. Arthur arrived 20 minutes later because I called him before the sentence was even fully out of Denise's mouth. June arrived 10 minutes after Arthur because she does not believe in letting men process structural danger without supervision. Noah came too, angry enough to leave tire marks in my drive. Eliza did not come, not yet. That hurt in a way I did not have time to address. By 1:30 in the morning, my kitchen table held the following: the forged delegation packet, 3 versions of the continuity memo, the revised funeral program, my orange bottle, Denise's pharmacy printout, a yellow legal pad with June's handwriting all over it, 2 glasses of whiskey no one had really earned yet, and the first clear outline of something much uglier than a family power play. June had spent the evening at the office with distribution logs, printer metadata, and email routing records. She wore her glasses low and flipped pages with the speed of contempt. "Here's what I know," she said. Nathan drafted the first continuity memo 9 days before Marianne died. He sent it from his private account to Byron Keene's practice administrator. 3 days later, a revised version came back with the medical phrasing cleaned up. The program change for the funeral was sent to chapel staff at 6:12 a.m. Monday under Eliza's event authorization code, but the routing IP came from Nathan's office terminal, and someone accessed the scanned signature folder from the board archive last Thursday at 9:48 p.m. "Who has access?" I asked. "Nathan, me, 2 paralegals, and Arthur if he still remembers his password." Arthur said, "I never forget my password." June ignored him. The access was from Nathan's credentials. Arthur looked at the packet again, then at me. "Victor, we are no longer looking at one offensive speech. We are looking at forged authority documents prepared with medical language from a friendly physician and distributed under funeral cover." Noah poured himself whiskey, then set it down untouched. "He needs the board," he said. "Fast. Otherwise he wouldn't have moved at the funeral." June nodded. "And likely lenders. A continuity narrative has no value unless someone important hears it before a contradiction forms." Arthur added, "Which means timing still matters. If he has a meeting tomorrow or Wednesday tied to transition language, we need to know before he defines your silence as consent." Denise sat very still at the edge of the table. She had changed out of scrubs but still looked like the only adult in the room who could start an IV blindfolded and then tell you which of your relatives to cut out of your life before dinner. "I want the pills tested," she said. "Not by Byron. Not by some friend of Byron. Chain of custody. Real lab. Tonight if possible." Arthur nodded. "I'll arrange it." Noah finally drank the whiskey. 1 swallow. Hard. "And what about Eliza?" he said. Because if he used her code for the chapel change, he either had her access or her trust or both. That silence was the cruelest one yet. Because there is anger you can aim outward, and there is the slower, uglier anger that comes from not knowing whether your own child has been fooled, used, or quietly standing on the wrong side for longer than you knew. I called Eliza at 1:58 in the morning. She answered on the 3rd ring sounding wrecked. "Dad, I need you here. I can't." Sophie finally fell asleep. "Nathan is in the guest room. We're not even speaking." Then listen to me. "Did Nathan ever ask for your event login, your phone, your email access, anything like that around the funeral?" A pause. Then yes. "He said the chapel coordinator needed a final seating update and his phone was dead, so he used mine for a few emails while I was with Mom's jewelry in the dressing room." June closed her eyes. There it is. Eliza heard her. "Who's there?" "Me," June said, "and Arthur, and Noah, and Denise." A longer pause. "What happened?" I told her. "Not every theory, just the hard points. Forged documents, revised programs, continuity memo, medication discrepancy." She made a sound like someone dropping a plate in another room. Then very quietly she said, "I didn't know." I believed her. That was part of what made everything worse. "Can you get away from him?" I asked. "He's asleep," she whispered. "Or pretending." "I don't know." "Dad, if the pills are real, then—" "Oh God, come in the morning," I said. "Before he wakes up, bring your phone. Bring any home printer or office access he ever used. Bring everything, and Eliza." "Yes. Do not let him tell you that your mother wanted secrecy." "I know," she said, "I know. I don't know what I know anymore." That, I realized, is how fraud works inside families. It does not simply replace truth with lies. It makes basic knowing feel arrogant. It makes certainty look cruel. It tells decent people to wait one more day for more context until the trap has enough signatures to become manners. At 2:30, after everyone else left, I sat alone at the kitchen table with Marianne's empty sleep mug still on the counter because I had not been able to move it since Thursday. The house felt like a museum of interrupted habits. Her pruning gloves by the mudroom, her gardening magazine on the breakfast chair, her half-written thank you notes in the desk drawer, her legal pad in my study with 3 questions about Tennessee debt and a final line that said, "Ask June for raw, not summaries." Raw, not summaries. Even dying, she knew the shape of the danger. I went into my study then and opened the lower left drawer where Marianne kept what she called the rude file. Not the formal legal file, not estate papers. The rude file, the one where she put whatever offended her enough to save for later. Inside were old vendor quotes, a half-written letter to a governor's office, 2 church donation cards, a broken mechanical pencil, 3 pages of handwritten questions about the Tennessee properties, and a sealed note in my wife's all-caps handwriting. "For Victor, if Nathan ever gets too helpful." I sat down hard enough to shake the desk. Even writing the sentence now makes my throat tighten. I should probably tell you I hesitated nobly, that I could not bear to open something from my dead wife on the night of her funeral, because grief made the room sacred. I did not. I tore the seal like a drowning man tearing open a life vest. Inside was one sheet. Victor, if you are reading this, then I was right to be uneasy, and you were right to want one more innocent explanation. I hope very much you get to mock me for this later. If you do not, here is the short version. Nathan keeps talking about stewardship when what he wants is transfer. He has been too interested in authority flow, lender timing, and emergency succession language for a man who claims to be optimizing operations. If I am gone and he suddenly becomes urgent about your health, your rest, your signatures, or your dignity, do not let him borrow my death to speed you up. Ask June for the raw debt schedules. Ask Arthur whether Byron Keene ever touched a single document without Nathan in the room. Ask Noah what he smelled in Tennessee. And for once in your life, Victor, trust your anger before your manners. I read it 3 times, then a 4th. Then I laughed and cried at the same time in the dark because even dead, Marianne was still conducting the meeting better than the living. Ask Noah what he smelled in Tennessee. At 3:07 in the morning, I called my son. He picked up on the first ring. What did you smell in Tennessee? I asked. Silence. Then you found Mom's note. Yes, he exhaled. A side letter, he said, or at least the shadow of one. During one lender dinner, Nathan kept referring to post-transition upside before transition was even supposed to be on the table. Not company upside, personal upside. I heard one of the Tennessee owners joke that Nathan wouldn't stay after the exit because men like him always cash in and relocate. Nathan laughed instead of correcting him. Why didn't you tell me that plainly? I did, Noah said. Just not in the kind of vocabulary you were willing to hear. That hurt because it was true. What else? I think he wasn't just trying to expand the company. I think he needed the expansion process to create enough complexity that nobody would notice transfer pricing and advisory junk hiding in the structure. And I think Mom saw it because she's the only person who actually read every ugly page instead of the summary deck. If he has a side deal, I said, where would it live? Noah answered quickly. Not in main company email. Probably outside. Maybe through a consulting vehicle. Maybe through Byron if Byron's dirtier than he looks. Maybe through the Tennessee seller rep or one of the lender intermediaries. I wrote everything down. Then Noah said something that stayed with me. Dad, you need to understand something. This is not just money to Nathan. Money is the proof. What he really wants is to be the man everyone already behaves as if he is when you leave a room. That's why he used the funeral. He didn't just want your signature, he wanted the crowd to rehearse your absence. That was exactly right. He wanted the crowd to rehearse my absence. I did not sleep at all after that. At dawn, I walked the back garden with Marianne's note in my coat pocket, while the sky over the ridge turned pale and insultingly calm. The dew was heavy. The roses she planted along the brick path needed deadheading. I stood beside the little stone bench she loved and thought of the line she had written. Trust your anger before your manners. By 7, I was ready to stop being polite in ways Nathan had never yet seen from me. By 8, Eliza walked into my kitchen with swollen eyes, an overnight bag, Sophie's backpack, and her marriage beginning to come apart in her hands. Eliza looked 20 years older than she had at the funeral. That is not poetry. That is simply what guilt and shock do to a face before the person underneath has had time to arrange a defense. Sophie slept upstairs in one of the guest rooms under a weighted blanket. Denise found in the linen closet because Denise has the irritating supernatural gift of locating whatever a child will need before the child knows it. Eliza sat at my kitchen table wrapped around a mug of coffee she did not drink and put 3 things in front of me. Her phone, Nathan's spare laptop, and a flash drive she had found in the glove box of his car while he showered. I don't know what any of this means, she said. I only know that if I looked at him any longer without doing something useful, I was going to start screaming. Good, Noah said from the counter. Useful before screaming is one of our best family traits. She shot him a look too tired to become anger. He softened a little. Only a little. That, in our family, counts as tenderness. June took the devices first. She had brought Malik Trent with her, our head of systems security, a former Army signal officer who wore plaid shirts, spoke rarely, and distrusted cloud storage in a way I had once found excessive and now found deeply comforting. Malik sat up at the far end of the table with cables, a right blocker, gloves, and the expression of a man about to autopsy a deer that had wandered into church. He asked Eliza 3 questions. Had Nathan ever used her phone for email? Yes. Had he ever asked for her passcode? Yes, during the hospital weeks because, as he put it, her hands were full and his phone battery was dying. Had he ever paired any company accounts to her personal cloud without her direct involvement? I don't know, she said, and that answer alone told Malik enough to make him sigh through his nose. Arthur arrived with the first toxicology request paperwork and worse news from the lab courier. The pills would be tested fast. but fast in chemistry still meant more hours than any of us wanted. Also, 2 board members had already emailed him asking whether Nathan's continuity proposal would be formally circulated before Wednesday's lender touchpoint. Lender touchpoint, Noah said. For Christ's sake. Arthur ignored him. Nathan is moving. That means we move faster. Victor, until I know more, I want a written notice from you to the full board before noon stating that no continuity resolution, delegation, medical review, or change in authority has your approval and that any documents suggesting otherwise are unauthorized. Do it, I said. Not on company letterhead, June added. On your own letterhead, too. And copy personal emails as well as board addresses. I do not want Nathan claiming this was some internal draft dispute if he has already been priming outside channels. That was June. Always one step past the place ordinary panic stops. Arthur drafted while I dictated. I sounded angrier than I felt, or maybe I felt angrier than I had yet admitted. Either way, it helped. I, Victor Hale, remain full chairman and acting chief executive of Hale Hospitality Group. Any document, memo, or communication suggesting delegation, incapacity review, interim executive transfer, or reduced authority has been circulated without my consent. Any further distribution of such materials is unauthorized and potentially fraudulent. No lender, board member, employee, or external advisor should rely upon them. Formal review is underway. Arthur tightened the phrasing. June tightened it more. Then it went out. We watched the sent notifications hit one by one. People imagine moments of corporate battle involving grand speeches and glass offices. In my experience, war often begins with 10 quiet outgoing messages and a room full of adults waiting to see who answers first. Nathan replied in 11 minutes. Victor, this is deeply unfortunate. In your current emotional state, I understand why you may be reacting defensively, but blasting incomplete information to the board only increases the instability Marianne feared. Please stop escalating. Let's involve Byron immediately and meet as a family. There it was. Emotional state, defensively, instability, feared, Byron, family. Every word selected to make my clarity look like symptom. June read it once and said, he writes like he is drafting future exhibits. Good, let's give him better ones. Malik spoke then for the first time in nearly 20 minutes. Found something. Everyone turned. On Eliza's phone, he had recovered the funeral chapel mail chain Nathan claimed to have handled because his battery was dead. The original message from chapel staff asked only for final seating. Nathan had replied from Eliza's device with an attachment labeled Service Score Final Score V3. That attachment included the revised program, Nathan's added speaking slot, and AV instructions for the transition slide. Arthur stopped before it played. The metadata showed the file had been created on Nathan's office terminal 3 days earlier. Eliza put both hands over her mouth. I didn't know, she said again, as if repetition might somehow reduce the damage. I didn't know. I believed her. Again. And again it hurt. Malik kept going. Also found deleted note draft in his spare laptop sync folder. Looks like a board talking points memo. May have been exported then removed. He opened it. Continuity narrative after service. 1. Emphasize Marianne's concern and Victor's dignity. 2. Keep language compassionate, never accusatory. 3. If Noah disrupts, frame as grief anger from a strange sibling outside operations. 4. If June resists, remind board she is procedural, not strategic. 5. Push for temporary signatory protection before Victor regroups emotionally. 6. Secure Byron letter before Friday if needed. I have read hateful things in contracts and lawsuits. There is a special kind of evil in seeing your own daughter's wedding become a management bullet point by retroactive logic. Eliza stared at the screen. He called me dignity, she said. Like I was furniture he was polishing before moving. Noah looked at her. Not gently, but not cruelly either. Yeah, he said. Now you know why I stopped laughing at his jokes 5 years ago. She flinched, then straightened. Good, because guilt is only useful if it hardens into action before it turns inward and starts demanding absolution as its own hobby. What do you need from me, she asked. That was the first fully adult thing she had said since walking in. June answered. Everything. Calendar access, cloud backups, anything he ever asked you to forward. Anything from your mother he may have intercepted under family pretext, and every single text in which he used the word gentle, dignity, burden, transition, or unstable. Eliza actually let out a short, broken laugh through tears. That could be half our marriage. Then start with the half that arrived around hospital visits, June said. We built folders all morning. Hospital, board, funeral, lenders, Byron, Tennessee, personal devices, office printer logs, deleted drafts, access patterns, medication, Marianne. At 11:12, Denise got a call from a nurse at the hospital pharmacy. Byron Keene had in fact entered an adjustment recommendation into my chart, but not through the usual physician review pathway. He had routed it via a private consult note linked to stress management during caregiver fatigue. The note recommended flexible dosing at home based on observed agitation and insomnia. Observed by whom? Not a nurse, not me. Nathan Cole. Arthur looked up slowly when Denise read that. So the son-in-law supplied the symptom observations, and the doctor supplied the authority language. Exactly, Denise said. And if Byron let non-clinical family reporting define the dose without direct exam, he is already standing on thin ice wearing expensive shoes. Thin ice wearing expensive shoes. Denise and Marianne would have liked each other under better circumstances. At noon, the first board responses arrived. 2 full supports for my notice, 1 careful acknowledgement from the bank representative, 3 vague concern emails clearly written after speaking to Nathan, and 1 message from Randall Sloan, our outside chairman emeritus, retired 3 years, but still respected enough to tilt older directors, asking whether we should convene a private family mediation before legal counsel turns grief into a public spectacle. Grief into a public spectacle. As though Nathan had not already used my wife's funeral as a press release for my decline. Arthur drafted a crisp answer. No mediation until fraudulent materials are accounted for. Any director relying on unauthorized medical characterizations assumes personal risk. That woke them up. At 12:44, Byron Keene called me directly. I put him on speaker without telling him. That is not noble. It is useful. Victor, he began, I understand emotions are running high. There is no phrase in the English language that has ever improved a dangerous man's position less quickly. Byron, I said, why is my son-in-law entering observed symptom notes into medication adjustments on my chart? A pause. Micro. Still there. Nathan was communicating concern as a caregiver. He is not my caregiver. He was acting in good faith under extraordinary stress. Did you examine me when you increased the dose? Another pause. Then I had sufficient relational context. Denise actually swore aloud. Relational context, she said. You arrogant little fraud. Byron heard her. Who is there? People with better ethics than you, Arthur said. Byron's voice hardened. I think we should all take a step back. No, I said, you take one. Away from my chart, away from my family, away from any letter, note, consultation, or recommendation tied to my competence. And if you have already drafted anything for Nathan implying decline, confusion, instability, or incapacity, send it to Arthur Bell in the next hour, or discover what subpoenas feel like while your coffee is still hot. He tried one more tactic then. Victor, I worry this level of hostility confirms exactly why Nathan believed support structures were needed. June burst out laughing. A clean, sharp, terrible laugh. There it is, she said. He can't even hear his own scheme over his own voice. Byron hung up. Malik looked at the call timer and said, saved. Good, Arthur said. Very good. By early afternoon, we understood the shape of Nathan's plan better. He had been building a paper trail around me for weeks. Not weeks of hard evidence, weeks of framing, missed calls, medication-supported fog, concerns reported by a loving son-in-law, private doctor language, draft governance packets, scanned signature, soft launch at the funeral, pressure on the board, pressure on lenders, and if needed later, a family mediation that could quickly become a probate filing if enough people had already been taught the word episodes. That was the attack. Not one forged line, a layered narrative, the kind that keeps working even after one piece cracks because people prefer the comfort of the whole shape. At 2:06, Nathan sent a message to the board claiming my morning notice demonstrated acute volatility and confirming that he was arranging a compassionate private discussion with medical counsel to avoid reputational harm. Malik found it because Nathan, in his hurry, blind copied one of the archived operations aliases still forwarding to June's oversight box. Never rush a thief, June said. They get generous with mistakes. Arthur was furious then in the cold, precise way that actually moves courts. Good. He files better angry. He began preparing injunction papers in case Nathan tried to present any continuity resolution to lenders before we could lock the governance lane. June and Malik started building a chronology. Denise pursued pharmacy records. Noah drove to the Nashville council contact he still knew through operations, and by the end of the afternoon came back with exactly what Marianne had suspected. A side compensation draft tied to a successful portfolio realignment event. Not signed, not final, but real enough. The beneficiary line did not name Hale Hospitality. It named Cole Strategic Advisory. Nathan had not merely wanted temporary authority. He had wanted a sale path. And if I looked too fogged, too grieving, too unstable to resist one, all the better. When Noah slapped the draft down on the kitchen table, nobody spoke for maybe 5 seconds. Then Eliza said very quietly, "Did he marry me or did he acquire me?" No one answered. What could we say that would not sound like pity? Pity was not what she needed. She needed clean ground. Pity only makes mud. I said both can be true until one gets proved false. Right now, he's proving the worse option. She nodded once, then wiped her face and said, "What does he still not know we know?" Now we were getting somewhere. June answered first. The side compensation draft, the printer metadata, the program revision chain, the dosage discrepancy, and possibly the fact that Byron just walked into a live wire. Arthur added, He also still believes he can frame any pushback as grief and volatility. That is useful. People like Nathan get sloppiest when they think they are still the adult in the room. Noah leaned back in his chair, then let him keep thinking that. There it was, the sentence that changed our posture from defense to design. Then let him keep thinking that. I looked at the people around my kitchen, my wounded daughter, my furious son, my dead wife's nurse, my procedural assassin of a corporate secretary, my lawyer, my systems man, the note from Marianne in my pocket, and something inside me, something that had been stuck between grief and rage since the chapel finally settled into shape. All right, I said. Then we stopped trying to correct him privately. We make him overplay. June's eyes narrowed. How? I thought about Marianne, about the way she used to let a liar take one more step than he should, because men reveal most when they believe the room still belongs to them. I thought about the chapel speech, the revised programs, the scanned signature, the gentle tone. I thought about Nathan needing speed. Need is dangerous because it shortens patience. Short patience makes mistakes. Mistakes, when arranged properly, become evidence. He wants an emergency continuity move, I said. Fine. Let's give him the chance to ask for one in a room that can record him clearly. Arthur looked at me carefully. Victor, I'm not talking about signing anything. I'm talking about bait. He thinks I'm foggy. He thinks Eliza is still halfway in his pocket. He thinks the board wants calm. He thinks lenders fear uncertainty more than they fear fraud. So we give him what he thinks he wants. A private memorial board session. Compassionate, controlled, no drama. And we let him explain himself all the way into criminal language. Noah smiled then, not happy, wolfish. Now you sound like Mom. That was the first compliment that had felt honest all week. Arthur was still cautious. It could work. It could also drive him underground. June shook her head. No, not yet. He's too invested in authority transfer before the lender window closes. He will not go underground until he tries one more polished public move. The question is not whether he moves. The question is whether we choose the room. Choose the room. That is power in family wars, not volume, not even proof at first. The room. I looked out the kitchen window toward the lower garden where Marianne's rosemary bushes were turning silver in the late light. Then I said it. Ashcroft Ballroom, Thursday evening. Memorial governance session in Marianne's honor. Board only, no staff, no lenders in the room, but allow remote advisory line in. Let Nathan think he's finally stabilizing the narrative under solemn cover. June controls the invitations. Malik controls the room. Arthur controls the legal perimeter. And I walk in looking just foggy enough to make him brave. Denise actually smiled. That, she said, is an incredibly unhealthy plan. I approve. Thus began the week I stopped mourning publicly and started preparing revenge professionally. The next 48 hours taught me more about theater than 3 decades in hospitality ever had. Hotels teach you staging. Weddings teach you timing. Corporate families teach you how much damage can be done when one person decides emotion is just another venue to control. Nathan did not go quiet after my notice. He went smoother. That is always a bad sign. At 7:14 the next morning, he sent a company-wide message in his capacity as CFO, thanking everyone for their grace during an emotionally difficult week and asking staff to direct all transitional questions through finance and legal, while the family organizes a temporary leadership support structure around Victor's changing needs. Changing needs. Not illness, not incapacity. Just that awful managerial phrase. Vague enough to sound humane. Specific enough to create a social reality before facts arrive. June nearly bit through her pen reading it. He is seating the staff, she said, not with hard claims, with posture. He wants them already behaving as though you need shepherding. Can we stop it, I asked. We can answer it, she said. Stopping implies he still has the right to define the frame first. So we answered. A direct note from me. Short, unsoftened. No leadership transition has been approved. No temporary support structure has been authorized. Any internal or external communication suggesting otherwise is inaccurate. Please route questions directly to me, June Mercer, or Arthur Bell. The message landed harder than his because clarity always does once someone finally uses it. Within an hour, 3 general managers called me personally. Not because they suspected fraud, because they could feel the company splitting under the language. Good operators do not always understand politics, but they understand weather. Nathan responded by asking for a family meeting at the estate. Just family, no council, no board, no Noah. Arthur laughed when he saw that last condition relayed through Eliza. He is literally writing the exclusion list for future testimony, Arthur said. Bless him, we declined. Nathan then proposed what he called a structured reconciliation conversation with Byron present to protect everyone's emotional safety. Denise read that and said, I would like 10 uninterrupted minutes in a locked room with his definition of safety. We declined that too. By then, Malik had finished imaging Nathan's spare laptop. Half of it was careful. The other half was careless, in exactly the way arrogant men get careless when they think passwords are morality. He found draft folders named benign things, vendor optimization, seasonality notes, event margin cleanup. Inside those were board narratives, lender framing points, a file called Legacy Transition FAQ, and one particularly nauseating spreadsheet mapping influence variables. Board member names down the left. Across the top, columns labeled grief leverage, reputation sensitivity, banker dependency, likely concern trigger, and message lane. Next to Randall Sloan, retired emeritus, was written, use Marianne language. He loves founder mythology. Next to board member Felicia Dunn, emphasize staff calm and vendor continuity. Next to lender rep Jonah Weir, avoid decline terminology. Use rest and governance support. Next to my name there was no row. Just a note in yellow, keep dignified. Never let him feel pushed until signatures are boxed. Noah read that and said the quietest thing imaginable. He gamed us like seating charts. Yes, June said. That is exactly what he did. Malik found more. A recorded rehearsal clip from Nathan's phone. Just audio. Probably captured while he was driving. Nathan practicing the funeral speech. He changed words mid-sentence as he spoke. Not decline. Too sharp. Episodes of confusion. No, episodes. Stop there. Use Marianne worried. Use dignity. Use all of us. We listened to that in my kitchen with the windows closed and nobody moving. Hearing a man rehearse the public downsizing of your mind in his car on the way to your wife's funeral does something to you. It strips away the last desire to stay decent for his sake. Arthur asked Malik to duplicate everything 3 times. Chain of custody. Off-site backup, printouts where useful, and no one under any circumstances was to let Nathan know how much of his own vanity we were now carrying in folders. Eliza grew quieter as the evidence mounted. Not weaker. Quieter. There is a difference. She slept in Sophie's room that second night because Sophie kept waking every few hours asking whether Dad was coming to the house, or whether Granddad was mad, or whether Grandma would be angry if everybody fought over her after she died. There are no good answers to those questions. Only cleaner lies and dirtier truths. I heard Eliza in the hall at 3 a.m. after the second wake-up. She was leaning against the wall in one of Marianne's old cardigans with both hands over her face. I thought I was helping, she said without taking her hands down. I know. No, she said. You don't. He spent months telling me you were forgetting things and hiding how tired you were because you couldn't stand the idea of being managed. He said Mom saw it and was trying to spare you humiliation. He said the company was too fragile for another crisis right after her death. Every time I hesitated, he made hesitation look selfish. Like if I questioned him, I was choosing your pride over everybody's jobs. I thought I was protecting you from a fall. I didn't understand he was building the stairs. That last line hit with the force of something Marianne might have said. Maybe that is why I did not interrupt her. Then she looked at me and asked the question that matters most when families crack open. Can you ever trust me again? I answered the only way I could if I wanted the answer to stay true later. Not automatically, but yes. If you keep choosing the truth when it costs you. She nodded. That was enough for the moment. Noah, meanwhile, kept doing what Noah had always done when the family ran too hot. He went where the underside of the business lived. He drove to 3 properties in 30 hours, talked to maintenance heads, looked at storage invoices, pulled old renovation packets. A company can lie beautifully at board level while still leaking truth through loading docks. That is one reason operators and executives rarely love each other. One deals in present tense. The other deals in framed futures. By Wednesday afternoon, Noah had 2 things. The first was a stack of rushed payment approvals tied to the Tennessee conference properties. Not fraudulent on their face. Just too fast, too eager, too dependent on bridge terms that only make sense if someone expects an exit event to solve the pain later. The second was a story from an Ashcroft banquet captain named Morella. 2 nights before Marianne's funeral, Nathan had asked her whether the ballroom AV system could support a confidential board presentation immediately after a memorial service if the family preferred not to schedule a second event. He did not say if. He said when he asked it, as if the answer had already been chosen and he was just checking whether the room could do the trick. So even before the funeral, Nathan had been thinking about Marianne's memorial as a transition venue. Not just a speech, a venue, a stage, a launch pad. The obscenity of that nearly made me sick in a new way. Arthur took Morella's statement through counsel. June logged the AV inquiry. Malik pulled badge access times around the ballroom systems closet. Nathan had been in there twice the evening before the service with Chapel Tech supervisor Colin Reeves. Colin, when called, sounded half terrified and fully eager to insist he had done nothing wrong, which usually means a man is close enough to wrongdoing to smell it and far enough from courage to hope paperwork will forgive him. He met Arthur and June at a diner off Route 29 because men who fear depositions like booths and bad coffee. By the end of the meeting, we knew Nathan had asked him to preload a 10-slide tribute deck after the eulogy, in case the family wanted a reassurance note for investors and staff. Colin had hesitated. Nathan had told him Marianne herself had asked that legacy continuity be addressed gracefully before rumor took hold. There she was again, my dead wife, endlessly busy in Nathan's stories, always asking for the exact thing that benefited him most. Byron Keene, meanwhile, tried to recover his footing with a formal letter. It arrived Wednesday at 4:10 p.m. by courier. Thick paper, clinic letterhead, the kind of stationery men use when they want format to do half the lying. Arthur opened it in my study while the rest of us stood around him like parishioners at a bad sacrament. To whom it may concern, over recent months I have had several informal consultative interactions regarding Mr. Victor Hale's escalating sleep disruption, grief dysregulation, and intermittent executive functioning concerns, as reported by immediate family. Arthur stopped, looked up, then kept reading. While I have not conducted a full cognitive panel, I believed prudent interim support structures and reduced administrative pressure were medically reasonable until comprehensive assessment could be arranged. Byron had chosen his lane. Not direct diagnosis. Not enough honesty either. Just enough pseudo-caution to let Nathan say a doctor thought supportive authority redistribution was medically reasonable. June said, "He writes like a coward with a thesaurus." Arthur pointed lower on the page. Also, he copied Nathan. And only Nathan, not you, not Denise, not a primary care physician, not anyone who might ask whether a doctor should use the phrase executive functioning concerns after chats relayed through a son-in-law. That mattered, hugely, because cowardice in medical language often tries to survive by staying one step away from direct responsibility. But once the pattern becomes visible, distance looks like design. Denise called the state licensing board contact she had from an unrelated case, not to file yet, to ask procedural questions. Sometimes procedure is just reconnaissance wearing a cardigan. By the end of the call, she knew exactly how far Byron had already stepped outside best practice. Far enough that once we dropped the right packet in the right office, his week would stop being abstract. Nathan kept pressing. He sent Eliza flowers Wednesday evening. White roses, of course. Marianne's funeral flowers all over again, translated into apology theater. The card read, "I am still trying to protect what your mother built. Please don't let your father's anger turn grief into destruction." Eliza handed me the card wordlessly. I read it once, then handed it to Noah. Noah read it and said, "Same line, different vase." Exactly. That night we finalized the trap. June would issue the notice herself. A private memorial governance session Thursday at Ashcroft Ballroom, 6:30 p.m. Purpose: temporary review of leadership continuity, lender stability, and estate-related operational implications following the passing of co-founder Marianne Hale. Attendance: board members, primary family stakeholders, company counsel, and invited advisory support. Nathan would receive the notice not as a concession from me, but as a formal board response to recent confusion and concern. That wording was deliberate. It let him believe the board still half-bought his narrative. Pride does the rest. Arthur's condition for the plan was simple: no signatures, no papers touched until he said so. If Nathan went fully legal too early, law enforcement moved on probable cause from the existing fraud packet. But if Nathan stayed where we expected, confident and instructive, we would get something better. His own mouth. Maybe Byron's too. And ideally both in one room, in one system, under one clean chain of evidence. Malik and Aaron Bell, a quiet AV specialist June trusted from 3 conference seasons and 2 union negotiations, took over Ashcroft that afternoon. They checked the ballroom mics, board feeds, side room lines, remote connection logs, ceiling cams, and audio redundancy paths. Aaron is one of those men who can tell you whether a liar will sound cleaner from the lectern or from the side wing before he's heard the liar speak once. He mic tested every chair like a priest testing faith. "We are not trapping a genius," he told me while coiling cable. "We are trapping a man who thinks the room likes him more than it likes facts." Those are my favorite kind. There is a specific shame in admitting that revenge begins to steady you, not heal you, steady you. By Wednesday night, I still missed Marianne so hard it bent my breathing, but I was no longer floating inside it. Anger had given my feet a floor. That frightened me a little. Marianne would have noticed. She always noticed when I got too comfortable operating at the edge of cold. Do not let hatred flatten your accuracy. She told me once after a litigation year that nearly cost us our first property. Men are sloppiest when they feel morally superior. Stay exact. So I tried to stay exact. I reread her note. I walked the lower path. I sat in her library chair. I thought about the fact that Nathan had used the word dignity like a blade. I thought about every time Byron had said support structures as though that meant decency instead of leverage. And I decided my revenge would have to be Marianne's kind. Not loud first, exact first, then loud enough that no one could rewrite it later. Thursday morning, the pill test came back. The tablets Nathan had been giving me were more than triple the original dose. Same family of medication, higher strength. And with enough additional sedative interaction risk that any elderly, sleep-deprived, highly stressed man could absolutely present as slow, foggy, and inconsistent under repeated use. Arthur read the report once and said, "Good. Now I can say poisoned without sounding emotional." Denise corrected him. Not poisoned, manipulated. Poison sounds wild. This was measured. That makes it filthier. She was right. Wildness gets surprise. Measured harm gets systems. By noon, the board had largely committed to the meeting. Even Randall Sloan, who still hoped everything could be called misunderstanding if we all wore enough wool and old money around it, agreed attendance was necessary. Nathan replied last, exactly as June predicted. "Thank you. This is the respectful path. I will ask Byron to join briefly so no one has to speculate from incomplete emotional impressions." Incomplete emotional impressions. From the man who had rehearsed my decline in his car. Perfect. He was coming, and he was bringing Byron. Good. Very good. By 4 p.m., all that remained was the hardest part. I had to decide how much weakness to perform. I hated that question. Not because I lacked imagination, because I understood too well what it required. To let Nathan grow careless in the ballroom, I could not arrive like a man in full command. Not completely. If I walked in hard and clear and visibly dangerous, he would tighten. Byron would tighten. They would slide back into hedged language. Sympathy would rebound. Half the board would spend the meeting praying for family mediation instead of truth. So I had to give them enough rope, which meant I had to borrow the shape of the lie they had built around me. Marianne would have told me to stop being dramatic about it. A performance for a bastard is still a performance, Victor. Save the tragedy for better company. Still, it bothered me, because men who have been falsely framed as failing do not enjoy practicing the angle of their own supposed failure. There is a humiliation in it even when the audience is guilty. June handled that problem the way June handles most emotional complaints. She turned them into tasks. "Fine," she said. "We're not asking you to drool into a fern. We're asking you to appear tired, guarded, and a little slower than usual," which, frankly, after this week would not be acting. Arthur almost smiled. He was trying not to. Lawyers enjoy trap design more than they should. "Keep your answers short at first," he said. "Let Nathan interpret restraint as weakness. Ask for water once. Take longer to sit than usual. Do not ramble. Men like him distrust rambling because they cannot control it. What they misread best is contained fatigue. Contained fatigue." I wrote the phrase down. Marianne would have mocked me for turning emotion into coaching notes. Then she would have improved the notes. Eliza wanted no part of the performance until the very end. "I don't know if I can sit in a room and let him speak like that again," she admitted around 3. "If he starts using Mom's name, he will," I said. "I know. That's why I don't know if I can hold." June, in one of her rare gentle moments, looked at her over the rim of her glasses and said, "You don't have to hold immediately. You only have to hold long enough for him to forget you stopped belonging to him." That steadied her more than any of my attempts would have. June understands women in betrayal seasons in a way men never fully do. She knows the difference between public collapse and strategic silence. She knows when shame is still trying to make itself the main event, and when rage has finally started demanding utility. Noah, on the other hand, was too eager. "I should sit directly across from him," he said. "Make him look at me the whole time." "No," Arthur said. "You are the one variable he still feels entitled to dismiss as emotional contamination. Tonight you are not contamination, you are witness. That means controlled timing." Noah hated that, but he took it, grudgingly, which, from him, is the closest thing to discipline. Sophie stayed with my sister Valerie across town. That decision alone made Eliza cry for 20 straight minutes in the guest bath because she understood, finally and all at once, that we were protecting her daughter from her own husband, before the marriage had even fully admitted to itself what it was. By 5:30, the house was dressed for war in the clothing of memorial. Dark suits, quiet shoes, printed folders, phone chargers, backup batteries, legal pads, chain of custody envelopes, Marianne's note in my inside pocket, a blood pressure monitor. Denise insisted I humor because she said righteous indignation is not technically cardio. The whole thing felt absurd and meticulous and terribly American. Grief privatized, fraud documented, revenge catered. Before we left, I went upstairs to my bedroom and opened Marianne's jewelry box. Not because there was a clue, not because the plot required a sentimental object, because I missed my wife and I was about to walk into a room where a man had been using her name as social lubricant for a week. I wanted something of hers on me that had never been translated through him. Inside the velvet insert sat her lapel pin. A small silver grape leaf she used to wear at harvest dinners, and once during a zoning hearing, because she said if local officials insisted on staring at her while lying, they might as well get a tasteful focal point. I pinned it inside my jacket where no one else could see it. Then I looked in the mirror. I did not look like a broken man. I looked like an older man who had buried his wife 4 days earlier and had not yet chosen whether to become dangerous. Good enough. We drove to Ashcroft in 2 cars, Arthur with me, June with Eliza and Noah behind us. Malik and Aaron were already there. Dana Morrow from the County Fraud Unit was not officially present, not yet, but she was near enough, briefed enough, and waiting for the right threshold. That had been Arthur's recommendation. Do not flood the room with badges too early. Give vanity time to do its work. Ashcroft Ballroom sits behind the chapel across a gravel court and a rose terrace. Marianne redesigned 15 years ago because she said weddings should arrive at the room through something alive. The ballroom itself is high-ceilinged, cream-paneled, and lined with tall windows looking west over the vineyard slope. At dusk, with the chandeliers on low and the sky turning amber behind the glass, it can make even mediocre people look briefly honorable. One of Marianne's enduring talents was choosing rooms that tempted people toward their better selves. Nathan had always preferred rooms that flattered authority. That is part of why he wanted this one. Aaron met us at the service entrance. All set, he said. Main room mics live. Table mics redundant. Lectern hot. Remote line patched and mirrored. Recording local and off-site. If somebody sneezes in strategic language, we'll have it twice. Malik handed Arthur a tablet. Live room view from 3 angles. No hidden cameras in the illegal sense. Just house feeds from Ashcroft Security, all policy compliant and all finally useful for something besides proving florists stole vases at weddings. Board packets tonight contain only agenda and prior notice, June said. No resolution pages on chairs. If Nathan wants paper, he will have to physically produce it. Good, I said. Better, she replied. People reveal more when they think they are the ones bringing order into disorder. Inside, staff had stripped the ballroom of almost all celebration. No flowers except one arrangement of dark green magnolia leaves and white garden roses under Marianne's portrait at the sideboard. No music, no linen bows, no candles, just water, coffee, legal pads, and the cold, quiet dignity of a room preparing to witness a killing that was only half metaphor. The board began arriving at 6, Randall Sloan first, wrapped in old camel hair and the scent of expensive tobacco. Felicia Dunn next, sharp-eyed and already suspicious now that too many memos had appeared in too few days. Jonah Weir from the bank came by remote line, screen on at the far end. 2 outside directors, 1 estate advisor. Our controller, Marcia Ellery. And to my satisfaction, Morella from Ashcroft Operations quietly seated at the back as a factual witness regarding Nathan's earlier ballroom inquiry. Nathan noticed her and did not like it. Good. Byron Keene arrived with Nathan at 6:24. They entered together but not 2 together. Another one of those careful bad details you only see once you already know something is wrong. Nathan with the solemn executive son-in-law posture. Byron with a leather folio and that infuriating face of soft concern educated into revenue. He saw me by the west windows and gave a tiny sympathetic nod. I wanted to put him through the glass. Instead, I let my shoulders slope a little, let the wear show, let him believe the version of me he had dozed and described was still available for purchase. Nathan came over first. Victor, he said quietly, thank you for coming. Really, this is the right step. He sounded relieved. Not about the family, about the room, about the stage surviving to host him. I looked at him for a second longer than usual before answering. Let's keep moving, I said. I'm tired. His eyes flashed satisfaction so quickly most people would have missed it. I did not. That sentence told him exactly what I wanted it to tell him. Tired, not enraged, not ready. Good. Byron stepped in. How are you sleeping? I turned my head toward him slowly. Not with anything you touch, I said. Arthur coughed into one hand to cover what might have been a laugh. Nathan kept smiling, but tighter now. We all want tonight to be constructive. Constructive, June said from behind him. A wonderful word. Let's sit. The room settled. I took the chairman's seat at the center of the long table because no matter how tired I looked, I was not surrendering physical fact. Nathan sat 2 seats to my right, Eliza beside him. Noah opposite Nathan as Arthur had instructed, close enough to matter, far enough not to dominate. June on my left, Arthur at the end, Byron near Nathan, but technically on the advisory side, Malik and Aaron invisible in the back line of service doors like ghosts with cables. June opened the meeting exactly as Marianne would have wanted. No indulgence, no scene setting, no false softness. This memorial governance session is convened at the request of the board following unauthorized continuity communications issued in the days after Marianne Hale's passing. The purpose tonight is to clarify authority, review any claimed medical or operational basis for interim transfer, and determine whether further legal action is required. This session is being formally documented. Nathan's eyes moved toward the back. Just enough. He had heard the last line. Good. Let him decide. Documentation still favored him. Randall Sloan cleared his throat. Before we begin, I want to say we are all here out of love for Marianne and respect for Victor. Noah muttered, spare me. Eliza kicked his ankle under the table. I saw it happen. That too was family. Nathan folded his hands. Perhaps the cleanest place to start is compassion. No one here doubts Victor's lifelong contribution. This is not about replacing him. It is about protecting him and the business during a season Marianne herself feared would push him past what was sustainable. There she was again, my wife. Dragged in by the wrist, I said nothing. That was harder than it sounds. Silence is easy when you are safe. Silence while a man uses your dead wife's fear as a tool takes discipline. Nathan mistook it for fatigue. Of course he did. He looked around the table and continued. The last 4 months have been brutal. Victor has not slept consistently. He has repeated instructions, missed lender timing, signed duplicate authorizations, and relied more heavily on informal medication support than is prudent for a chairman under this level of pressure. Byron can speak to the risk profile more carefully than I can, but from where I sat with Marianne, the concern became impossible to ignore. Byron opened his folio and steepled his fingers like a man about to narrate his own caution. To be precise, I have not conducted a full cognitive assessment, he said. However, based on repeated family-reported symptoms, behavioral variability, stress load, and observed executive strain, I considered temporary supportive delegation a medically reasonable short-term measure. There it was again, supportive delegation, medically reasonable, short-term measure, words built to sound like blankets and operate like locks. Felicia Dunn asked the first useful question. Did you personally examine Victor in connection with competence? Byron shifted, not formally in a panel setting. Did you personally examine him in any setting where delegation of corporate authority was under discussion? I had several relational contacts. Randall frowned. What does that mean? It means, June said, that he likes nouns when verbs would expose him. Byron's mouth tightened. I interacted with Victor socially and during periods of family stress. Arthur said, did you ever advise him directly that you were documenting executive concerns? No, Byron said, because that level of formality had not yet become necessary. June wrote something on her pad. I didn't need to see it to know it was unkind. Nathan stepped in before anyone else could press. The point is not procedural perfection. The point is that we all saw what was happening and none of us wanted tonight. I certainly did not. But pretending the last month looked normal would be irresponsible. That was when I chose to speak. How much money is the Tennessee side letter worth to you, Nathan? The room stopped. Not slowed, stopped. Nathan's face did not collapse. He was too trained for that. But every line in it rearranged at once around a new task. Damage calculation. What? He said. I leaned back, slowly, tired, contained. You heard me. Randall looked between us. What side letter? Nathan let out a brief, sad breath. This is exactly the kind of confusion I was worried about. We're talking about continuity, and Victor is pulling half-remembered acquisition fragments into the room because grief is disorganizing chronology. Good. Very good. He had chosen contempt dressed as concern. Noah said nothing. Eliza said nothing. June did not move. Arthur did not blink. We were all holding the line. I rubbed my temple once and looked down at the legal pad in front of me as if collecting my thoughts. Maybe, I said. Maybe my chronology is poor tonight. Help me. Who is Cole's strategic advisory? Nathan's fingers tightened once on the edge of his folder. Tiny movement. Enough. I don't know what document you're misunderstanding, he said. Let's not misunderstand it then, I replied. June, she slid a copy down the table. Not to me. To Randall first, then Felicia, then Marcia, then the outside directors. Paper does work when the room is ready to hear it. Nathan looked at the header, and for the first time all evening, the mask actually fractured. Not a full collapse, just the unmistakable look of a man meeting a document he thought still belonged to a locked drawer. That is not operative, he said. It was never executed. No one had accused him of execution, only of existence. He answered a bigger charge than the one in the room because panic always drafts ahead. Randall adjusted his glasses. What exactly am I looking at? A proposed side compensation arrangement, Arthur said evenly, tied to a portfolio realignment event that would materially reward Nathan Cole upon a successful sale path arising after transition in senior authority. Transition in senior authority, Felicia repeated, meaning Victor steps aside. Nathan forced a laugh. Every acquisition cycle generates alternative structures. This is exploratory garbage. Half-baked consultant language. To call it motive is absurd, and yet you did not mention it while giving a funeral speech about my dignity, I said. His head turned toward me. Victor, please. No, now the room was mine. I could feel it happening. Not because I had shouted, because he had over-explained too soon. You used my wife's service to roll out a continuity narrative, I said. You circulated forged authority documents. You used Eliza's account to revise funeral programs. You let Byron build medical fog around me using symptom reports you supplied. And while doing all that, you had an undisclosed side compensation pathway tied to my removal. If you want the word absurd in this room, speak it into a mirror. Nobody moved. Then Eliza did the bravest thing of her marriage. She turned to Nathan and said, "Did you ever intend to tell me about Cole's strategic advisory?" He looked at her with what I assume he thought was injury. It looked more like calculation. "It wasn't real," he said. "It was scenario work. You know how these things get drafted." "I do know how things get drafted," she said. Apparently better than I knew my husband. That landed on him harder than anything I had said so far. Good. Because men like Nathan survive older male anger. What they often do not survive is the sudden withdrawal of the nearest intimate witness. Byron tried to recover the room. "I don't think this line serves Victor's health." Noah finally laughed. Loud, open, delighted in the ugliest way. "There he is," he said. "The doctor man thinks motive is unhealthy." Arthur said, "Byron, for the next few minutes your view on health is less relevant than your view on why you wrote supportive delegation language for a chairman you never formally examined while corresponding privately with the beneficiary of that delegation." Byron adjusted the folio in front of him. The move was small. So was the crack in his voice when he answered. "I wrote no delegation language," he said. "I offered a general caution that temporary support structures were medically reasonable under stress conditions." Arthur slid the letter Byron had couriered that morning into the center of the table. "Read your own sentence aloud," he said. Byron did not touch the page. "Read it," Arthur repeated. Silence. Then June, with that maddeningly calm tone she uses when contempt has matured into leisure, picked up the letter and read for him. "Based on repeated family-reported symptoms, behavioral variability, stress load, and observed executive strain, I considered temporary supportive delegation a medically reasonable short-term measure." She set the page down, then looked at him. "Now tell the room what part of that sentence was based on a direct formal evaluation rather than Nathan Cole." Byron's face had gone a little gray. That pleased me more than it should have. I had informal visibility into Victor's state. "No," Denise said from the back of the room for the first time. "You had dosage influence into his state." Every head turned. Nathan too. Denise stepped forward wearing dark slacks, flat shoes, and the kind of total absence of performance that makes liars hate nurses on sight. "State your role for the room," Arthur said. "Denise Romero. Hospice nurse for Marianne Hale during her last 7 weeks, and direct medication coordinator in the Hale home. And unless Dr. Keene wants this room to believe tablets switch manufacturer, dosage, and print labels all by themselves, I'd like him to explain why the medication Victor Hale actually received did not match the one authorized through the local pharmacy." Nathan went very still. Byron said, "I don't know what you're implying." "Good," Denise replied. "Then I will stop implying. The pills Victor was taking were over 3 times the original dose. The adjustment path in his chart came through your note based on symptom reporting from Nathan Cole. No formal exam, no documented consultation with primary care, no hospice review, and no direct disclosure to the patient that his increased fog, slowed recall, and morning disorientation were being pharmacologically encouraged by someone who kept calling that support." Byron tried to stand on indignation. It did not work. He looked like a man climbing a ladder he had forgotten to anchor. "That is a reckless interpretation." "No," Denise said. "Reckless is changing a dosage around a grieving man and then calling his reaction evidence." The room changed again. Up to then, even people beginning to suspect fraud still had the option of imagining something messy, unfortunate, complicated. The medication stripped that away, because pills feel physical. Physicality embarrasses euphemism. A forged memo can still invite interpretation. An altered dose invites prosecutors. Jonah Weir's image flickered on the remote screen. I need to understand whether the bank was being supplied medical or authority representations tied to a sedated executive. Nathan answered too quickly. No lender was ever given medication information. Again, too big an answer to the question asked. Always the same flaw. He ran to the dangerous edge first. But they were being given authority transition cues, Felicia said. Cues supported by the idea that Victor was slipping. Nathan spread both hands. What was I supposed to do? Pretend there was no risk. Pretend the company could drift after Marianne died. Pretend Victor was functioning normally when every person in this room could see he wasn't. There, the pivot, from denial to justification. Justification is confession with better tailoring. I looked at Aaron at the back service door. He gave the slightest nod. Recording clean. Good. What every person in this room could see, I said slowly, was a husband sleeping badly while his wife died. The rest you manufactured. Would you like help listing how? Nathan's eyes came to me. Really came to me this time. No more soft management. No more son-in-law theater. Just anger that the target had stopped cooperating with the story. Go ahead, Victor, he he said. If you need the room to clap for your outrage, take it. Arthur spoke before I could, gladly. First, forged funeral program revisions sent under Eliza Hale Cole's account. Second, unauthorized continuity packets bearing a scanned signature of Victor Hale. Third, undisclosed side compensation language tied to Nathan Cole's benefit upon authority transition and sale path. Fourth, private medical support, phrasing constructed without formal assessment and distributed in aid of governance transfer. Fifth, altered medication dosing supplied through Dr. Byron Keene on symptom reporting from Nathan Cole. And sixth, which I suspect we are about to discuss in more detail, direct strategic framing of this entire sequence through pre-planned public messaging at Marianne Hale's funeral. Nathan smiled then, actually smiled. Wrong move. You have drafts, he said. Fragments. The language of stressed people making contingency plans while a founder dies. You do not have intent. Aaron moved. One button, one screen. The ballroom projector came alive behind Marianne's portrait. Not the transition slide Nathan had once loaded. Something better. A plain black title card. Private rehearsal audio. Source device Nathan Cole iPhone. Recovered from imaged laptop sync. Nathan's face emptied. Then his own voice filled the ballroom. Not decline. Too sharp. Episodes of confusion. No, episodes. Stop there. Use Marianne worried. Use dignity. Use all of us. The clip ran only 14 seconds. That was enough. Nobody in the room made a sound. Not even Randall. And Randall loved throat clearing the way insecure men love handshakes. Nathan stood abruptly. This is illegally obtained. No. Malik said from the back. It was legally recovered from your synced local folder under preservation review after active fraud indicators emerged. Would you like the timestamp too? Nathan ignored him. Byron looked like he wanted the carpet to open. This proves nothing, Nathan said. It proves I practiced words before speaking at a funeral because I didn't want to break down in public. June almost smiled. Then she remembered the room. Good for her. No, she said. It proves you rehearsed the language of Victor's decline for a service where Victor had never approved you to speak. Eliza was crying again by then, not collapsing, just crying with the exhausted fury of a woman who now had to listen to the performance notes of her own marriage. Nathan looked at her. Eliza, don't. That one word. Don't. No explanation, no truth, just the naked instinct of a man who had finally lost control of his nearest witness. She stared at him. Did you write talking points about grief leverage for my mother's funeral? He said nothing. Did you? Still nothing. Malik put another page on the screen, the influence spreadsheet, board names, concern triggers, message lanes, use Marianne language. He enlarged the yellow note beside Randall, then the line about keeping me dignified, then the line about Noah as grief anger from a strange sibling outside operations, then the line about securing Byron letter before Friday if needed. Felicia Dunn swore under her breath. Marcia Ellery looked like she might faint. Jonah Weir on the monitor removed his glasses and set them down very carefully, which in banker language is roughly equivalent to a field execution. Randall stared at the projection. Good Lord. Nathan took one step back from the table, then another. Distance. His oldest instinct. Move the body. Reclaim perspective. Reset authority by posture. He pointed at Noah. He gave this to you. He hacked this. He has hated me for years. Noah did not rise, did not shout. He simply looked at Nathan and said, I hated you after years of watching you talk like this. Not before. That mattered too. Because anger from the right person, at the right temperature in the right room, sounds a lot like truth finally getting tired of being polite. Byron made one last attempt at professional distance. My involvement has been materially overstated. Nathan overreported symptoms. I trusted family context under urgent conditions. If mistakes were made, they were made in good faith. Mistakes, Denise said. Wonderful. Let's name a few. Changing dosage without direct patient counseling. Allowing family observation to substitute for examination. Creating language around executive functioning you were not qualified to support in a governance dispute. And my personal favorite, sending a courier letter this morning still trying to justify delegation after you knew questions were already active. Byron tried to answer. Arthur cut him off. Save it. You can make your good faith case to the licensing board after tonight. Nathan looked around the room then, and I could see the precise second he understood he had lost not just the argument but the social architecture. That is the moment predators fear most, not evidence, not law. The moment ordinary people stop wanting their guidance. He turned back to me. All right, he said. You want honesty. Here it is. This company was drifting toward a wall and nobody had the stomach to admit it because Marianne made fear look like loyalty and you made exhaustion look like leadership. Yes, I moved fast. Yes, I lined up options. Yes, I used language this room would actually understand. Because if I had waited for your feelings to clear, we would have missed every lender window left. There it was again. Honesty as a weapon. He always believed if he stripped off enough courtesy, hard truth would retroactively justify everything beneath it. You forged my authority, I said. I stabilized a vacuum, he snapped. You drugged me. I managed a man who refused to sleep while signatures kept piling up. You used my wife's funeral, and that one finally made him lose his footing. He spread his hands wide. What was I supposed to use? A shareholder update, a press release. That funeral was the only room where everyone who mattered was already seated, already quiet, and already ready to believe Marianne would have wanted order. The words landed like a dropped tray. Even after everything else, that sentence was the one that stripped the last possible defense from him, because it contained the whole crime in plain English. The funeral was the room. Everyone who mattered was already seated, already quiet, already ready to believe. There it was, not grief, opportunity. Noah stood then. I thought he was going to hit him. He did not. He simply said, Mom would have had you dragged out by your tie before the third sentence. Nathan looked at him with open contempt. Your mother loved outcomes. She just liked nicer stories on the way there. That was the final mistake. Not the fraud, not the signature, not even the funeral. Insulting Marianne in a room full of people who had built things with her. That destroyed the last emotional shelter he might have had among the older directors. Because money men can excuse a lot if profit stands near it. But if you call their dead peer naive while standing beneath her portrait, even old cowards get a spine. Randall Sloan rose, very slowly, one palm flat on the table. Nathan, he said, do you understand that you just admitted using Marianne's funeral as a staged authority room? Nathan did not answer. He was breathing too hard. Randall looked toward June. Was this recorded? Yes, June said. Every word. Good, Randall replied. Then let the record show I'm requesting immediate suspension of Nathan Cole from all company roles, pending formal fraud referral and civil review. And let the record further show that any person in this room who continues to rely on Byron Keene for governance-related medical language after tonight deserves what follows. That was the old man finally waking up. Took him long enough. Still useful. Felicia seconded the motion instantly. Marcia thirded it before anyone could explain thirds are not structurally necessary. She did not care. That too was useful. Nathan pushed his chair back so hard it hit the wall. You can't do this on emotion. Arthur said, no. We're doing it on documentation, admissions, and your catastrophic vanity. Byron stood too, as if leaving might somehow restore professional altitude. I won't stay in a room where legal threats replace clinical nuance. Then don't, Denise said. You don't practice in one anyway. He took 2 steps toward the side exit. Dana Morrow entered through it with 2 fraud officers and the sort of quiet authority that makes every conversation in a room suddenly remember what nouns actually mean. Perfect timing, she said. Nobody breathed. Dana was wearing a navy suit and carrying a folder thick enough to make liars nostalgic for cleaner lives. She looked first at Arthur, then at me, then at Nathan and Byron. Nothing dramatic. No television posture, just the straightforward focus of a prosecutor who already hates the summary version because she has read the exhibits. Mr. Cole, Dr. Keene, based on the documentation, recordings, and statements obtained to this point, I need both of you to remain available and refrain from leaving the property while we formalize next steps. If either of you destroys records, contacts witnesses regarding testimony alignment, or attempts further authority action in Hale Hospitality Group tonight, I promise your week gets much uglier from there. Nathan laughed once, which surprised even him. Shock does that. It reaches for familiar sounds and finds the wrong one. This is insane, he said. A family dispute and a dosage misunderstanding and suddenly I'm a criminal because Victor can't accept transition. Dana did not blink. A family dispute does not normally include forged signatures, manipulated medical framing, undisclosed compensation pathways, funeral rollout strategy, and a rehearsed plan to exploit grief leverage on a board. We are well past family dispute. Byron tried a softer route. I need to contact counsel. You may, Dana said, after you hand over your phone. That finally took some of the physician out of him. He looked like every other man whose credential had stopped shielding him. Nathan turned to Eliza then. Instinct, last refuge, spouse as rescue rope. Eliza, tell them this is out of control. She stood slowly. No theatrics, no speech first, just stood. Then she took off her wedding ring and set it on the table beside the water glass. I think, she said very quietly, that it was out of control long before tonight. I just got here late. There are sounds rooms remember. A slapped face, a dropped glass, a chair overturning. The little click of a wedding ring touching oak in a silent ballroom belongs in the same category. Nathan stared at it, then at her. He actually seemed more wounded by that than by Dana. He said her name once. Just once. No strategy left in it. She did not answer. Dana looked at her officers. Let's begin. Everything after that moved in layers. Phones collected, devices logged, Arthur issuing formal suspension language, June locking access credentials live through Malik, Jonah Weir on the screen confirming the bank would freeze any transition discussions until independent review. Randall requesting emergency board authority to install interim dual sign controls, not because he mistrusted me now, but because everyone in the room had just learned how much damage one polished man could do with too much unsupervised paperwork. Nathan kept talking. Men like him always do at the end, not because words will save them, because silence is the first environment they never learned to govern. You are blowing up the company. You are making yourselves look hysterical. There are real debt pressures. There are real lender concerns. You think the market cares that your family feels hurt? Dana finally turned to him and said no. The market cares whether a company officer tried to acquire emergency authority through forged documents and manipulated medical claims under funeral cover. Please stop helping the case. That shut him up. For perhaps 12 full seconds. A personal record. Byron sat down heavily and asked for water. Denise, standing nearest the service station, poured it, then set it in front of him and said, I hope you remember this glass clearly. It's the first clean thing you've touched all week. I should not have enjoyed that. I did. At 8:09 p.m., the board voted unanimously to suspend Nathan Cole from all roles. At 8:12 p.m., company system access terminated. At 8:14 p.m., Byron Keene's advisory relationship was formally severed. At 8:16 p.m., Dana's team began on-site device preservation. At 8:19 p.m., I finally allowed myself to look up at Marianne's portrait on the sideboard. The west light had gone dark by then. The windows reflected the ballroom back at itself. Chandeliers, faces, paper, shock. My wife's portrait floating above all of it like a witness, too sensible to call this justice yet. Not justice, not fully, not even close. But the room had changed sides. That matters more than most people know. People who have never been through a collapse like that imagine the room ends everything. It doesn't. The room only decides who has to start telling the truth next. The real work begins after. In fluorescent offices and conference calls and evidence rooms and kitchens where nobody knows whether to wash the coffee cups before or after the crying. That night at Ashcroft ended in fragments. Sophie brought back under Valerie's arm because Eliza did not want her spending another night in uncertainty. Nathan escorted out through the service corridor because Dana preferred not to let staff see the face he wore once management stopped working. Byron leaving with his shoulders bent for the first time since I had met him. Randall Sloan staying 30 extra minutes because old men love feeling honorable after they have been slow. June taking every paper on the table and stacking them by category before anyone could contaminate sequence. Malik killing credentials property by property while Aaron pulled the backups. Noah standing outside under the portico in the dark, one hand on a stone column, breathing like he had run a race he never wanted to enter. I found him there after the officers left. You all right? I asked. He nodded without looking at me, then shook his head, then laughed. That kind of laugh. The kind that means your body cannot decide which damage to serve first. I spent 5 years hating him, he said. Maybe more. And I kept thinking the worst thing about that was how smug he sounded. Turns out the worst thing was how right my instincts were while I kept trying not to be the difficult son. You were not difficult, I said. He finally looked at me. Dad, I was difficult. I was also right. Those are not mutually exclusive. That too was true. Our family had made a religion out of confusing tone with accuracy whenever the wrong person got too close to an ugly fact. Nathan had lived inside that weakness beautifully. Noah swallowed hard, then said, Mom would have burned the ballroom down herself. I nodded. She would have made them carry the water first. That got a real laugh out of him. Small. Still there. Inside, Eliza sat alone in Marianne's planning room with her ringless hand flat on the oak table. Sophie was upstairs asleep in the bridal suite because Ashcroft, like all event properties, was built with rooms above the pageantry for those who need somewhere private to unravel in. I stood in the doorway a long time before entering because fathers do not always know whether their daughters need arms or air after betrayal. She solved that by speaking first. I can hear her voice in every sentence he used, she said. Meaning Mom's voice. Yes, not because he sounded like her, because he knew exactly what parts of her people trusted. Stewardship, calm, continuity, grace. He took her best words and turned them into cover. That insight mattered more than anything else she could have said, because it meant she had stopped defending him internally. People do not really leave manipulative spouses until the language itself goes sour in their mouths. I sat across from her. Why didn't you tell me sooner, she asked. About the audit. About Mom being uneasy. About any of it. The honest answer was shame. The fuller, honest answer was that I had spent too many years being the man in charge, and too few being the man who shared uncertainty early. Fathers who build companies often develop a terrible habit. They assume keeping worry to themselves is strength, even when all it really does is isolate the people who could have helped. Because I wanted one more innocent explanation, I said, And because I was still treating your marriage like it deserved privacy, even after it started affecting the business. That was a mistake. She nodded, then looked at the table. I kept waiting for him to sound obviously cruel. He never did. He always sounded responsible. And responsible is such a flattering disguise if you're tired enough. There was nothing to add to that. So I said the only thing she could really use from me that night. He fooled you where your loyalty lived. That is not the same as you helping him once you saw what it was. She cried quietly after that. Not dramatic, not childlike, just the deep, exhausted crying of a grown woman who has realized her grief was being used as a lever while she still thought she was mourning honestly. I stayed, that was all. Sometimes presence is the least glamorous form of love and the most necessary one. By morning, the ballroom meeting had become 3 active fronts. The company front, the criminal front, the family front. The company front moved fastest because companies hate ambiguity more than they hate scandal. Scandal can be priced. Ambiguity freezes signatures. June and Arthur were at the office by 7. Randall joined by 8. We instituted dual authorization on all lender communications, suspended Nathan's signatory authority, locked his email, froze non-routine transfers, and ordered independent forensic review of every acquisition and advisory fee attached to the Tennessee structures, Vineyard Terrace renovation, and 2 consulting vehicles Nathan had touched. Marcia Ellery, our controller, cried in my office when she handed over the first reconciled ledgers. Not because she was weak, because she had spent 2 years doubting her own discomfort every time Nathan smoothed something she thought deserved rougher questions. Accountants suffer a special kind of gaslighting in polished fraud. They get told they are too operational, too narrow, too attached to line items. Then one day the line items walk into court wearing handcuffs. The criminal front moved with less sentiment. Dana Morrow and her team executed formal warrants on Byron's office, Nathan's home office, and the Tennessee vehicle records by noon Friday. They recovered more than I had expected and less than I had wanted. There is always less than you want. Villains rarely label folders crimes and exit plan for investigators. Still, there was plenty. Enough drafts, enough side notes, enough coordination, enough device traffic between Nathan and Byron, and, as it turned out, one Tennessee intermediary named Caleb Ross who had been circulating future compensation language under the phrase post-founder event support. Post-founder event. That is what my removal had been reduced to in their papers. Not a death, not a marriage, not a father, an event. Dana called me that evening and said, "We now have a stronger theory." Not only did Nathan want authority, he needed authority before quarter close because the Tennessee structures were already slipping and the side compensation line only matured if he could demonstrate founder transition without destabilizing lender confidence. "In plain English," I said. "In plain English," she replied. "If you stayed in charge long enough to ask real questions, his money got harder to find and maybe disappeared entirely." There it was. The old song. Money, yes, always money in one pocket, but in the other pocket, power. Because he could not have made the money without first teaching everyone to look at me like a problem that needed management. Byron broke second. Not publicly, not nobly, procedurally. His counsel sent over a position letter trying to separate clinical caution from governance misuse. Arthur read it and muttered, "He's already negotiating nouns." That meant pressure had found its mark. Good. The state licensing board opened preliminary review on the medication adjustments and informal competency language. Denise almost smiled when I told her. Almost. Nathan held longer. Men like him always do. Their whole identity rests on the idea that composure itself is evidence. Even in disaster, they think if they speak carefully enough, the room will return. He requested spousal contact through counsel. Eliza refused. He requested supervised conversation regarding Sophie. The family court judge, after one look at the emergent record, ordered temporary no contact except through structured channels pending review. He requested access to company files he claimed were necessary to defend himself. June sent back a list of publicly available items and nothing else. He requested compassion from the board. Randall, to his eternal credit, did not answer at all. The family front was the slowest and ugliest because paperwork cannot do what time still owes people. Sophie knew only that Dad was not at home, Mom was crying at wrong times, Grandpa was in meetings all day, and everybody kept saying Grandma's name in voices that made the whole house feel like a bad surprise. Children are excellent weather readers, terrible archivists. They know everything is wrong before anyone gives them the correct map. Valerie and a therapist Dana recommended helped us decide what to tell her and in what order. Not lies. Never lies again. Just age-sized truth. Dad made some serious, dishonest choices. Grandpa is not sick in the way Dad said. Adults are working with lawyers and judges to make things safe. None of this is your job. Grandma did not cause any of this. You are loved by all sides and protected by the adults who still know what that means. Sophie listened with the grave alertness of children who understand more than you hope. Then she asked the question that made Eliza walk out of the room and cry against the hall wall. Did Dad love us, or just the company? There is no good answer when a child asks that, only the least damaging true one. I knelt in front of her and said, I think your father loved a lot of things badly, and when people love badly for long enough, the people near them get hurt. That is why adults are stepping in now. She thought about it, then asked, did he use Grandma's funeral on purpose? Yes, I said. She nodded once, very small, and said, that was ugly. Children cut cleaner than courts sometimes. The forensic review widened the second week. Nathan had not merely arranged one side compensation note. He had built a whole parallel consulting shell, Cole Strategic Advisory, and used it to route planning fees, transition language, and future success metrics for a sale event he was privately modeling while publicly calling it contingency. Not all of it was collectible theft. Some of it sat in the gray swamp between immoral and indictable. But enough crossed the line. Enough also tied back to Byron. Emails, signal messages, calendar holds titled V availability, draft letters, and most useful of all, a short message Byron sent at 6:51 a.m. on funeral day after Nathan forwarded the revised program. Use caution language only. Do not overstate decline until after room temperature. After room temperature. I made Dana read that twice. What does that mean? She answered without hesitation. It means they were calibrating grief as a setting, after room temperature, after the room had accepted the story enough to hold warmer language. That was the kind of message prosecutors love because it reveals human intention trying to sound technical. The board, meanwhile, had its own reckoning. Not everyone emerged noble. A few directors spent the first month pretending they had always harbored doubts. June hated them most. She has a hard time respecting retrospective courage. I do too. Randall tried to repair some of his slowness by staying close. He came by the office 3 afternoons in 1 week, reviewed interim controls, met the bank, and once sat in Marianne's old conference chair for 10 full minutes without speaking before saying, I should have smelled him sooner. That was probably the most honest sentence he had offered in years. Felicia Dunn surprised me. She turned out to be better in crisis than in smooth quarters. Some people are built like that, boring when everything hums. Terrific once something catches fire. She took over the restructuring talks Nathan had contaminated, cleaned the lender communication lanes, and told Jonah Weir directly, if your bank tries to leverage this family's grief into a cheaper term package, I will make enough noise to ruin your quarter. Jonah, to his credit or his fear, did not test her. By the 3rd week, we knew enough to state the full internal truth, even if public filings were still catching up. Nathan had planned to use Marianne's death as timing cover for a founder transition narrative. He had been shaping a medical fog around me through Byron's dosage and language. He had forged authority documents and seeded a continuity story through staff, board, and lenders. He had tied that authority event to a personal compensation pathway through Tennessee sales structures. And he had done it all while presenting himself as the responsible son-in-law, protecting a grieving family. Not a spontaneous betrayal, an engineered sequence. That distinction matters. A man can betray you in anger. Nathan betrayed us in project phases. I took no pleasure in telling that truth to Sophie in smaller pieces as the weeks went on. But I did it, because one thing had become sacred in me after all of this. No more rooms built on strategic half-knowing. Not for children. Not again. Eliza moved into the East Cottage on the estate for a while. Close enough for help, far enough for privacy. She filed for divorce in month 2. Not out of drama, out of clarity. I respected that. For the first few weeks, she spoke like someone recovering from a cult too polished to call itself one. She would stop mid-sentence and say, I can't tell if this is my thought or his phrasing. That is what prolonged manipulation sounds like once it leaves a smart person's mouth. The therapist told her that was normal. I hated the word normal by then. Too much wickedness survives under it. Still, she improved. Not quickly, honestly. Noah came back into the company part-time during the forensic cleanup. He made it very clear he was not returning for sentiment. I am here because if I let the vineyard distribution plan stay in Randall's hands and the hotel linen renegotiations stay with Marcia alone, we will all die stupidly before winter. That was how he said yes. In our family, tenderness often arrives disguised as insult. Working with him again after all those years was stranger than I expected. He was rougher, quieter, less eager for approval, more certain. Marianne would have been proud and annoyed in equal measure, which is usually how you know a child is growing correctly. One night about 6 weeks after the ballroom, he and I stayed late in the office reviewing a vendor map Nathan had distorted with strategic consolidation language. Around 10, Noah leaned back in his chair and said, Do you know what the worst part is? I assumed he meant Nathan. The worst part is how close I came to giving up on the company just so I wouldn't have to fight him anymore. And if I'd done that, he would have won for free. That stuck with me. Because fatigue is one of fraud's quietest allies. People imagine greed conquers through force. Often it just waits for better people to get tired. By month 3, Dana's case had teeth: forgery, fraud, elder financial exploitation, wire components, medical record misuse, exposure for Byron, conspiracy lanes, potential securities-related attention once lenders and sale representations were fully mapped. Arthur said it looked bad enough that Nathan had finally stopped asking for private understanding through counsel and started bargaining in adjectives: overstated, contextual, informal, unfortunate, misread. Every one of those words is lawyer smoke. It means the fire is real. Then came the piece that made the whole thing feel complete in the ugliest way. A voicemail from Marianne. Not secret, not hidden, simply overlooked in an archived hospital backup post. Eliza had not realized her phone still held. It was dated 12 days before Marianne died, sent to herself as a reminder after an infusion session because she sometimes dictated thoughts when writing hurt her hands. Most of the note was practical. Ask June for raw debt. Tell Victor not to let Nathan handle the donor dinner sheets. Move Rose order to Valerie if weather turns. And then, near the end, tired and clear as a knife under cloth, she said, "If I go before this is sorted, Nathan will use concern language. He always does when he wants authority without argument. Do not let anyone call Victor tired and then translate tired into transfer." I listened to that voicemail alone in my study after midnight. I do not recommend hearing your dead wife predict your betrayal with almost bored accuracy when the house is quiet enough to hear the refrigerator motor. It empties you out in places you thought grief had already finished with. The next day I played it for Arthur, June, Noah, and Eliza. Not for court, not first, for us. June swore softly and said she was still running governance from a chemo chair. Noah cried without hiding it. Eliza sat very straight and whispered, "I should have heard her sooner." Arthur simply took off his glasses and stared at the table, which for Arthur is the functional equivalent of saying a prayer. We did not use the voicemail publicly then. Some truths belong to the family before they become exhibits, and some of Marianne still felt like ours, not the state's. The state got plenty without it. Eventually Nathan was arrested on formal charges. Not at his office. He no longer had one. Not in some glamorous public perp walk either. At a townhouse he had taken on a temporary separation lease 2 counties over while still instructing his counsel to speak of reconciliation. Even his collapse needed staging. Dana told me he looked offended, which somehow felt exactly right. Byron surrendered through counsel. Doctors prefer parking garages and side entries when their certainty expires. The news broke local first, then regional. By noon, every hospitality newsletter in the Mid-Atlantic was running some version of CFO suspended amid funeral fraud allegations. Then, founder disputes incapacity narrative after memorial board confrontation. Then, medical consultant tied to governance scheme under review. I hated the publicity. I also knew Nathan had chosen the room. He had made private grief a weapon first. He did not get to complain when public fact took the weapon away. The oddest calls came from old acquaintances. Men I had not heard from in years, suddenly eager to tell me they had always found Nathan slick. Women Marianne used to chair committees with calling to say they wished they were surprised. One pastor actually said, "The Lord reveals." I nearly hung up. The Lord had not revealed a thing. June had, and Denise, and Noah, and a dead woman's note in the rude file. Still, if people needed theology to cope with paperwork, that was their business. My business was rebuilding the company, helping my children survive the truth, and making sure nobody ever again used the word dignity near my family without earning it first. Trial took 11 months to arrive. That may sound fast if you have never watched law move after family betrayal. It felt slow enough to grow old in. In those 11 months, the company survived. My daughter rebuilt a face she could recognize in mirrors. My son learned how to argue with me without old ghosts in the room. Sophie got taller, and Marianne remained dead in every room, no matter how busy we made ourselves, trying to prevent that fact from becoming the only one. People always want to know whether revenge feels good. I can answer that now with the authority of a man who got it and still had to wake up the next morning. Revenge feels clean for about 15 minutes. Relief lasts longer. Repair is the real work. And grief, if the person mattered, keeps showing up anyway with muddy boots and no respect for legal milestones. The case against Nathan ended up resting on 3 pillars. First, documents, forged signatures, program revisions, memo drafts, influence mapping, side compensation language, access logs, transition packets, the whole cold paper skeleton of his plan. Second, medical manipulation, the dosage changes, Byron's note structure, the lack of formal examination, the strategic use of symptom reporting, The letter, the timing, the language around executive strain and supportive delegation. Third, admissions. That was the pillar Nathan hated most because men like him can forgive paper for existing, even hate it, but they never quite get over their own voices turning witness. The rehearsal clip from the car, the ballroom projector audio, his sentence about the funeral being the only room where everyone who mattered was already seated, already quiet, and already ready to believe Marianne would have wanted order. That line became central not because it was poetic, because it was honest in the ugliest possible way. It revealed selection, timing, intent, predation. Byron tried to save himself by becoming careful late, very late. He split from Nathan's defense almost immediately once criminal exposure sharpened. His counsel argued he had been professionally careless but not criminally aligned. That line held just long enough for discovery to kill it. The messages did the killing. Use caution language only. Do not overstate decline until after room temperature. That message was not negligence, it was choreography. After that, Byron moved from caution to self-preservation. He offered limited cooperation, not enough to redeem him, enough to hurt Nathan. That too fit. Cowards often become useful only after the building starts collapsing on them personally. Nathan's defense strategy wandered through stages. First misunderstanding, then grief misread, then rough contingency planning under pressure, then when the paper got too hard, justified urgency. That was the one he returned to most. I had to move fast. Victor was not functioning. The company needed a hand at the wheel. No one else was acting. The debt was real. The risk was real. The side compensation was common exploratory structuring. The medication was intended to help. The funeral speech was clumsy but necessary. Everything ugly had been in service of stability. That is the oldest defense corruption has. Stability, order, continuity, the bigger good. Always some larger roof under which smaller crimes are supposed to become admirable. Dana Morrow dismantled that argument the way Marianne would have appreciated. Not dramatically, sequentially. Step 1. If stability was the goal, why the forged signature? Step 2. If support was the goal, why the secret side compensation? Step 3. If care was the goal, why the dosage changes without patient counseling and formal evaluation? Step 4. If respect was the goal, why the funeral rollout? Step 5. If continuity was the goal, why the influence spreadsheet mapping, grief leverage, and concern triggers? By the end of Dana's cross, even the words stability and stewardship sounded dirty. That was one of the few times in trial I felt something close to revenge and did not regret it, because Nathan had stolen language. Watching it taken back mattered. I testified on the 4th day. Older men tell themselves they will be calm on the stand because they have done harder things in business. That is mostly vanity. A courtroom is not a boardroom. In a boardroom, everyone already accepts your version has a right to exist. In court, your grief has to fit into answers while strangers write it down. Dana walked me through the basics first. The company, my marriage, Marianne's diagnosis, Nathan's role, the funeral, the documents, the pills, the ballroom, the defense attorney, a smooth woman from Richmond with the expression of someone who could apologize while stealing your driveway, tried to make me look proud, resistant to change, and too emotionally shattered to notice ordinary support offered by a competent son-in-law. Wasn't it true, Mr. Hale, that you had been sleeping poorly for months? Yes. Wasn't it true that your judgment was strained during your wife's final illness? Yes. Wasn't it true you relied increasingly on others for packet review and scheduling? Yes. Did you resent that? No. I resented being translated by people who benefited from the translation. That line stayed in the paper the next day. I know because Noah clipped it and put it on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a fish. That is his idea of emotional support. The defense pressed harder. Isn't it possible, Mr. Hale, that Nathan overstepped but genuinely believed he was helping preserve the company? I looked at her, then at the jurors, then at Nathan. No, I said, because people who genuinely mean to help do not rehearse your decline in their car before speaking over your wife's body. That shut down half her next page. Eliza testified too. That may have been the bravest thing I saw in the whole case, including the ballroom, because in the ballroom she still had shock carrying her. At trial she had memory, and memory requires choice. She testified about the phone access, the flowers, the cards, the way Nathan used her mother's language to guide her toward compliance. She testified about hearing him say he was protecting my dignity, about believing him, about realizing later he had positioned concern so that any hesitation from her would look selfish. And when asked why she had not spoken earlier, she answered in a way that left the courtroom perfectly still. Because he made agreement feel like love and doubt feel like betrayal, she said. It took me too long to understand those were not the same thing. The jurors looked at her then the way people look at a door opening where a wall had been. Manipulation is easy to judge abstractly. Much harder when you hear the person inside it name the mechanics. Noah did his part too. He testified about Tennessee, the side letters, Nathan's language around exit money, the operational fights everyone dismissed as temperament. He was excellent on the stand because he has stopped caring whether elegant people find him abrasive. That freedom is worth money. At one point, the defense lawyer asked him whether his long-standing dislike of Nathan colored his conclusions. Noah leaned forward and said, "My dislike of Nathan grew out of my conclusions. That tends to happen when a man keeps leaving fingerprints on rot." Even the judge looked up at that. Then came the hardest witness. Me again. Not because of the fraud this time, because Dana decided the jury needed Marianne. Not all of her, not private things, but the part that proved Nathan had not simply improvised concern after her death. He had exploited concern she had actually expressed in a completely different direction. Dana asked whether Marianne had ever worried about me. Of course she had. I was tired, I was grieving, I was sleeping badly. She loved me. Loving someone includes worrying when they are wearing themselves thin. Then Dana asked what form that worry took. Karst, directness, never transfer, never secrecy, never humiliation, never Nathan. Then she asked whether Marianne had ever authorized Nathan to speak for her about my removal, my dignity, or my capacity. No. Did she ever ask him to use her funeral to launch any authority change? No. Did she, in life, prefer raw documents or managed summaries when she suspected danger? Raw documents, I said. Why? Because managed summaries are where ambitious men put the parts they hope you'll skip. The courtroom laughed at that. Even the judge allowed it. For 1 second, Marianne was in the room, and every liar felt slightly overdressed. I did not play her private voicemail for the jury. We did not need it by then, and some things remained ours. But I heard it in my head every day of trial. Do not let anyone call Victor tired and then translate tired into transfer. Sentencing came later, not because the room required it, but because justice, unlike fraud, enjoys paperwork. Nathan drew just under 11 years and restitution orders large enough to outlive whatever remained of his vanity. Byron got fewer years, but he lost his license, his practice, and the protection of ever again sounding medically important in a room where facts have lawyers. Guilty verdicts first. Then the slow procedural turn toward consequences. Nathan was convicted on the major fraud counts, forgery, conspiracy, and financial exploitation components. Byron caught fewer criminal counts than Nathan, but enough. Enough to lose his license for good, and enough to keep him explaining himself to men who cared less for nuance than he did. When the verdict was read, Nathan did not look at me. He looked at the jury with pure betrayal on his face. That fascinated me. Predators almost always feel most wronged when rooms stop agreeing to be used by them. Eliza was beside me, Noah on my other side, Arthur 1 row back. June there too, because of course she was. She had not missed a single day involving paper or its consequences. When the clerk read guilty on the main fraud count, Eliza took one sharp breath and then, very carefully, did nothing. That control told me more than tears would have. She was not relieved in any theatrical sense. She was finished being gaslit by the room. That is different. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. I hate reporters on ordinary days. On days involving dead wives, forged signatures, and daughters rebuilding their names, I hate them like weather. Still, I stopped for one statement because silence too often lets bad men leave alternative versions behind them. I said this: my wife built our company on exact records and plain speech. What happened to our family and our business was not support. It was fraud carried in the language of care. If there is any lesson here, it is simple. Do not let anyone use your grief to hurry your consent. Then I left, short, clean. Marianne, enough. The company survived, not elegantly, not without bruises, not without selling 2 non-core assets she had never loved anyway, but it survived. We abandoned the Tennessee expansion completely. Not because growth is evil, because anything Nathan had touched felt contaminated until proven otherwise. The vineyard debt got refinanced under uglier but honest terms. Felicia handled that with the bank while threatening reputational pain in 3 directions. The ballroom bookings at Ashcroft dipped for 1 season because local scandal is terrible for weddings and fantastic for gossip. Then they came back stronger because brides, like juries, prefer venues with good lighting and a proven hostility to fraud. June stayed, thank God. I gave her a title bump she should have had years earlier, and she accepted it only after saying, "This is not gratitude pay, Victor. I would rather die." It wasn't. It was accuracy. Marcia stopped apologizing for line items. Also good. We hired an independent compliance lead no one liked at first, which usually means the hire is correct. Noah came back full-time after swearing he would not, which is also usually how the right things happen in my family. He took operations officially, and because he is his mother's son, whether he admits it or not, he spent his first 6 weeks relabeling purchasing pathways Nathan had turned into acronym soup. When I asked why, he said, because honest systems should not require translation. Eliza rebuilt slower. Divorce is not a single event. It is 1,000 little humiliations processed through forms. Division of assets, custody schedules, tax language, therapy, new passwords. The discovery that someone else had narrated your life back to you for so long, you sometimes still heard them in your own decisions. She worked with it, not around it, through it. One afternoon, about a year after the funeral, she stood in my kitchen watching Sophie spread frosting on a birthday cake and said, "I used to think being chosen by someone ambitious meant being safe with them. Now I think it means you should check whether they can be tender when no one is ranking them." That sounded like Marianne too. The women in my family do eventually get to the truth. I have simply spent too much of my life arriving after they do. Sophie changed in ways children do, by inches and then all at once. For months she would ask for plain versions. Who is at dinner? Who is picking me up? Who knows? Who signed? Who called? She became sensitive to withheld information in a way that broke my heart because children should not need information disciplined before algebra. So we gave her plain versions. Every time. No more strategic vagueness, no more adults smoothing the room for their own convenience. She also grew fierce. At 13, she told a school friend who made a joke about lawyers, "My granddad only hates them recreationally now." Useful to know. I laughed so hard I had to leave the room. And me. People ask the wrong question there too. Not did I heal. Healing is for cuts and bones and maybe marriages if you catch them before contempt turns professional. What happened to me was more structural. I became less polite in useful places. I trusted discomfort faster. I read the footer before the summary. I stopped taking any pill handed to me by a family member, no matter how good their intentions looked in a sweater. I sleep better now, ironically enough, without medical friends and concern notes. Not perfectly. Better. I also visit Marianne's grave every Sunday morning before breakfast. Not because grief requires ritual, because love does. And because once the trial ended and the reporters moved on and the board stabilized and the company started sounding like itself again, I realized the quiet was where the real aftermath lived. Sometimes I tell her what Sophie said that week. Sometimes what Noah broke and fixed. Sometimes what June threatened. Sometimes what Eliza managed to do without shaking. Sometimes nothing. Sometimes I just sit there and think about the line in her rude file. Trust your anger before your manners. She was right. She usually was. Annoying woman. A year and a half after the verdict, Ashcroft held its first major memorial event under a new rule I wrote myself. No family funeral or memorial held on any Hale property may include governance messaging, transitional remarks, donor asks, investor cues, or brand positioning language of any kind. Any speaker additions must be approved in writing by the next of kin and event director. No last-minute revisions without dual sign-off, no AV inserts without logged authorization. No one borrows grief for administration on my property again. June had the policy framed in the back office for one day as a joke. Then I made her take it down because I am sentimental in smaller ways than people assume. We also renamed the ballroom. That decision took me a long time because I did not want to turn Marianne into branding. She would have risen from the dead purely to insult me if I had done that badly. In the end, we kept it simple. Marianne Hall. Nothing else. No paragraph, no founder mythology, no engraved sermon. Just her name above the west doors and the knowledge that the room once used against us now carries the woman who would have cut the fraud at the knees herself. The real revenge, if you want the honest answer, was not the courtroom, not the arrests, not the headlines, not even the ring on the oak table, though I will carry that sound with me forever. The real revenge was this. Nathan wanted to turn my grief into transfer. Instead, it turned into scrutiny. He wanted Marianne's funeral to become the first room where people accepted I was already half absent. Instead, it became the room that later proved intent. He wanted the board to rehearse my removal. Instead, it rehearsed his downfall. He wanted to use my daughter as soft access and my son as dismissible anger. Instead, they became the two clearest witnesses against him. He wanted medication to turn me foggy enough to sign away the company. Instead, the dosage became a chain in the case. He wanted language, dignity, stewardship, care, support, grace. He wanted those words because people trust them before they inspect them. What he did not understand is that if you survive long enough, you can take words back. And Marianne, he kept dragging her name through every plan because he believed the dead are useful if you speak confidently enough for them. He was wrong. The dead do not stay usable forever. Not if the living who love them finally decide to defend the truth in their voice. The last line of this story does not happen in court. It does not happen in a boardroom. It happens in the vineyard at dusk 2 summers after the trial. Sophie was 14 by then, tall, sarcastic, too smart for most adults, and aware of it in the exact way Marianne would have both admired and monitored. She was helping Noah mark irrigation breaks because apparently in our family, children become useful the moment they can carry a wrench and an opinion. Eliza was on the lower path, talking to a wedding couple about garden access, because she had rejoined the company part-time and turned out to be very good at clients once no one was speaking through her. June was standing by the crush pad, arguing with a distributor. Arthur was nowhere in sight, which usually means he was alive but not currently billing. I was carrying 2 glasses of wine toward the old bench by the rosemary. The sunset was turning the west slope gold. The vines were full. The air smelled like soil and leaves and distant fruit. No photographers, no directors, no one narrating transition, just family, work, and a little weather. I sat down on the bench and put 1 glass beside me out of habit before remembering there was no one there to take it. Then Sophie came over, picked it up and said, "You always still pour too." I nodded. Your grandmother built a 30-year expectation into my hand. Hard to out-argue muscle memory. She sat down beside me and looked over the rows. Mom says you finally sleep better, most nights. Noah says that's because everyone around you has to sign things in triplicate now. That helped too, I said. She smiled, then got serious in that sudden way teenagers do when a real thought arrives and they hate how young it makes them feel. Granddad. Yeah. Do you think Grandma would be mad that everything bad happened after she died? No, I said. I think she'd be furious it happened at all. Different thing. Sophie thought about that. Then she asked the question that told me we had maybe done one thing right after all the lies. Do you think she would think we handled it okay? I looked out over the vineyard and took a minute before answering because some questions from children deserve the full respect of time. Yes, I said. Not because we were graceful, we weren't. Not because we were fast, we weren't. And not because we got everything right, we didn't. She would think we handled it okay because once we finally knew what we were looking at, we stopped pretending not to know. Sophie nodded, then sipped from the second glass without asking, because she is a Hale, and boundaries in vineyards are mostly symbolic. After a while, she said, Mom doesn't let anyone say support structures around her anymore. She makes this face. I laughed. Good. Keep that going for another 60 years. She leaned against my shoulder the way Eliza used to when she was little. Below us, the property moved through evening. Workers finishing, sprinklers ticking, Noah waving a wrench at someone. June still arguing. Eliza walking toward the house with the wedding couple and gesturing like Marianne sometimes used to. Life, not healed, lived. And I thought then that this was the part bad men never understand. They think the goal is to own the room. It isn't. The goal is to still have a life when the room is gone. Nathan had wanted the board, the title, the sale path, the signatures, the room, all of it. He got none of the only part that matters in the end. He did not get to remain welcome in the life he tried to exploit. We did. Marianne did not come back. Nothing beautiful in this story lies about that. There is no version where justice makes the grave temporary. There is no sentence strong enough to reverse the cemetery. But her voice did survive, in policies, in habits, in suspicion where suspicion was earned, in my daughter's spine, in my son's contempt for summary decks, in my granddaughter's allergy to euphemism, in the fact that nobody in this family now hears words like dignity, care, transition, or support without asking who benefits from them. Maybe that is not the ending people expect when they ask for revenge. Maybe they want bloodier things, cleaner things. One moment, one blow, one line, one ruin. Real revenge in a family like mine looked different. It looked like a forged narrative collapsing under documents. It looked like a wedding ring on oak. It looked like a doctor losing the credential he thought made him untouchable. It looked like a son coming back to the company without having to apologize for being right. It looked like a daughter learning the difference between loyalty and surrender. It looked like a granddaughter growing up in a house where adults finally answer the actual question asked. It looked like my wife's name above a ballroom no one will ever use against the dead again. And it looked like me, an old man who almost let manners finish what grief had started, sitting in a vineyard at dusk with my family still partly broken and still fully alive. That is enough for me, more than enough. If you take anything from this, take this. When someone starts speaking for your grief too quickly, stop them. When someone calls your confusion dignity, read the footer. When someone says support but reaches first for signatures, count the exits. And when the room suddenly wants you absent for your own good, ask who arranged the chairs. My son-in-law used my wife's funeral to announce my retirement before I had even thrown dirt onto her grave. He thought grief would keep me quiet. He thought concerned language would make me soft. He thought my children would break in the directions he chose. He thought my wife was dead enough to use. He was wrong. And if Marianne were here, she would probably tell me this script runs too long, the middle is flabby, and half the bankers in the story still deserve worse. She would not be wrong about that either.